Nicholas Greyson, Duke of Ashmont, spent 8 years planning the perfect revenge. His family destroyed, his father dead, his sister's mind shattered, all because of one man. But that man was untouchable. Wealthy, powerful, protected, until Nick discovered a weakness. Lady Justina Barrett, beautiful, brilliant, and desperate to be seen for more than her face. She was also the sister-in-law of Nick's greatest enemy. The plan was elegant: seduce her, marry her, then publicly destroy her. Watch his enemy suffer as someone he loved was devastated. Nick orchestrated every meeting, calculated every word, made her believe someone finally understood her. But somewhere between the bookshop and the rose garden, between strategy and truth, Nick made one fatal mistake. He fell in love with the weapon. The vengeful Duke's deception. Revenge has a price, and sometimes the destroyer becomes the destroyed. Chapter 1. Scars and Schemes. Nicholas Greyson, Duke of Ashmont, stood at the window of his study and watched London burn gold in the sunset. 8 years ago he'd watched this same view from a rookery boarding house with holes in his boots and rage in his belly. Now he owned half the street below. Revenge, it seemed, required money first. "Your Grace, the carriage is ready." His butler appeared in the doorway, impeccably neutral as always. "Thank you, Matthews." Nick didn't turn from the window. "Tell me, do you believe in divine justice?" A pause. Matthews had been with him long enough to know these weren't idle questions. "I believe, Your Grace, that justice often requires a human hand." Nick's mouth curved. "Precisely." He turned from the window and caught his reflection in the mirror above the mantel. 27 years old, dark hair carefully styled, grey eyes that women called striking and men called cold. The expensive evening clothes fit him like armour. No one looking at the Duke of Ashmont now would guess he'd once pawned his father's watch to buy bread. No one would guess a lot of things. "Matthews, do you remember the day I arrived here? When I first inherited?" "I do, Your Grace. You were 19. The estate was in difficulties." The estate was drowning in debt, the roof leaked in 12 places, and the staff hadn't been paid in 4 months. Nick adjusted his cufflinks, each movement precise. "You stayed anyway. Why?" Matthews permitted himself the ghost of a smile. "You reminded me of someone, Your Grace. Someone who'd been wronged and refused to stay down." "My father." "Indeed." Nick's jaw tightened. "His father. The Earl of Greyson. A good man who'd made one catastrophic mistake, trusting Edmund Blackwell, Marquess of Rutherford. Tell me honestly, Matthews, does the plan seem mad to you? Marrying a lady to punish her brother-in-law?" Matthews' tone was carefully bland. "Perhaps not mad, Your Grace. Merely ruthless." "Good." Nick reached for his evening gloves. "Ruthless is precisely what I'm aiming for." The memory came anyway, uninvited. It always did. His father's study. Nick, barely 19, home from Oxford for the summer. The smell of brandy and despair thick in the air. Nicholas. His father hadn't looked up from the papers scattered across his desk. "I need you to be strong." "Father, what's happened?" The servants are whispering. "Rutherford." The name came out like poison. "Everything we invested, everything I put into his shipping venture, gone. The contracts were forgeries, the witnesses were paid, the judges." His father's voice cracked. "He owns them all." Nick had stepped closer, his heart hammering. "We'll fight this, we'll expose him." "With what?" His father finally looked up, and Nick had barely recognized him. Red-rimmed eyes, hollow cheeks, the look of a man who'd already given up. "He's taken everything, Nicholas. The investments, the properties, even this house is mortgaged beyond redemption. Your mother's jewelry sold to pay debts. Your sister's dowry gone. Then we'll rebuild." "There is no rebuilding from this." "Just," his father stood, swaying slightly. "I've ruined us. Ruined your inheritance, your future, Caroline's prospects, your mother." He pressed his hand to his chest. "This will kill her. The scandal alone. Father, please. I'm sorry, my boy. I'm so terribly sorry." Nick had left for London the next morning to speak with solicitors. He'd returned 3 days later to find his father dead in that same study, a pistol in his hand and a note that said only, "Forgive me." His mother had lasted 6 months. Grief, the doctors said, though Nick knew it was a broken heart wrapped in a prettier word. She'd simply faded day by day until there was nothing left. And Caroline, sweet, gentle Caroline, just 16, had shattered like porcelain dropped on stone. The shock, the shame, the sudden poverty, the whispers, Something inside her had simply given up. She still lived, technically, breathed and ate and occasionally smiled. But the bright, laughing girl who'd once filled their home with music was gone, replaced by a fragile ghost who lived quietly in the countryside and rarely spoke above a whisper. All because of Edmund Blackwell, Marquess of Rutherford. Nick had inherited a dukedom drowning in his father's debts and stained with scandal. Society had watched, vulture-like, waiting for him to fail. He'd disappointed them thoroughly. 8 years of brutal work, strategic investments, ruthless business dealings, calling in favours, making careful alliances, rebuilding the Ashmont fortune coin by coin. He'd clawed his way back from ruin through sheer bloody-minded determination. And through it all, one thought had burned in his chest like a coal. Rutherford will pay. But how did one destroy a man who had everything? Wealth, power, political connections, a carefully cultivated reputation? The answer had come 6 months ago, in the most unlikely way. Rutherford had fallen in love. The carriage jolted over cobblestones, carrying Nick toward the Havisham ball. He'd received the invitation weeks ago and normally wouldn't have bothered. He attended society events only when strategically necessary. But tonight was different. Tonight, Lady Justina Barrett would make her official debut. Your Grace, forgive me for speaking plainly. Matthews sat across from him in the carriage, his usual post. But are you certain about this course of action? Having second thoughts about aiding my wicked schemes? I've aided far worse, Your Grace. I merely wonder. The young lady is innocent in all this. So was Caroline. Nick's voice went cold. So were my parents. Rutherford didn't care about their innocence when he destroyed them. True enough. Matthews was quiet for a moment. What do you know of Lady Justina? Enough. Nick had made it his business to know everything. 20 years old, only surviving sibling of Lady Helena, now Lady Rutherford. Father is Sir Gerald Barrett, a social climbing knight with expensive tastes and empty pockets. The family was gentry at best until Helena caught Rutherford's eye last season. And caught his heart by all accounts. Nick's smile was sharp. Indeed, the great Marquess of Rutherford, known for his cold business dealings and colder heart, fell genuinely in love, married Helena within 3 months. Society is still baffled. Some might call it romantic. I call it a weakness. Nick leaned back against the velvet seat. Rutherford has no children, no close family he cares about, but he adores his wife. And by all accounts, Lady Helena adores her younger sister. Which means Lady Justina is the key. Precisely. Nick felt that familiar cold satisfaction settle in his chest. I seduce her, court her properly, of course. I'm not a complete villain. Win her affection, propose marriage. Then after the wedding I ensure her complete ruin. A very public scandal, perhaps an equally public abandonment. Society will tear her apart. Rutherford will be forced to watch his beloved wife's heart break as her sister is destroyed. And you'll have your revenge. I'll have justice. Nick corrected softly. Rutherford took everything I loved. It's only fair I return the favour. Matthews said nothing, but his expression spoke volumes. You disapprove. It's not my place to approve or disapprove, Your Grace. I merely serve. But you think I'm becoming the very thing I hate. I think, Matthews said carefully, that revenge is a seductive mistress, and like all mistresses, she may demand more than you're willing to pay. The carriage rolled to a stop before Nick could respond. The Havisham mansion blazed with lights, music spilling into the street. London's finest would be inside, glittering and gossiping and hunting for the season's fresh scandals. Nick stepped down, smoothing his coat. Well then, let's go meet my future bride. The ballroom was the usual crush of silks and jewels and barely concealed ambition. Nick entered with the confidence of a man who knew exactly how much he was worth and how many people in this room owed him favours. Ashmont. Lord Pemberton appeared at his elbow, already half drunk despite the early hour. Didn't expect to see you here. Thought you despised these things. I make exceptions. Nick accepted a glass of champagne from a passing footman. Special occasions and all that. Ah, come to see the diamond, have you? Can't blame you. Every man here's angling for an introduction. Pemberton lowered his voice, conspiratorially. Between us, her father's already fielding offers. Heard Lord Weatherby bid 20,000 a year. Old bastard's past 60, but Barrett's considering it. Nick's hand tightened on his glass. Is he now? Can't fault the man for wanting to secure his daughter's future. Though if you ask me, selling her to the highest bidder seems a bit mercenary. Girl deserves better. Indeed. Nick scanned the crowd, looking for there. His breath caught despite himself. Lady Justina Barrett stood near the terrace doors, surrounded by at least a dozen men and looking like she wanted to bolt. She was beautiful. That much he'd expected from the reports. Golden hair swept up in an elaborate style, deep blue eyes, figure that made men forget their own names. But it was her expression that stopped him. She looked utterly, completely miserable. "Poor thing looks like a rabbit surrounded by hounds," Pemberton observed. "Though I suppose that's what happens when you're declared a diamond. No peace from then on." Nick watched as an elderly gentleman, Weatherby, presumably, leaned far too close and said something that made Justina's smile turn brittle. She stepped back slightly, her hand clutching her fan like a weapon. She doesn't look particularly pleased with her admirers. "Would you be? Half of them are fortune hunters, the other half are old enough to be her grandfather, and not a one of them has asked her opinion on anything beyond which flowers she prefers." Pemberton shook his head. "Beautiful girls have it rough, you know. Everyone wants to own them. No one wants to know them." Nick filed that observation away. Interesting. "Ashmont, you sly dog." A new voice joined them. Lord Blackthorne, one of Nick's few actual friends. "I know that look. You're planning something." "I'm merely observing." "You're calculating. I've seen you do business deals with less intensity." Blackthorne followed his gaze to Justina. "Good God, you're not seriously considering..." "Considering what?" "Courting the diamond. Half of London's already trying. You'd need an exceptional strategy to stand out." Nick's smile was slow and dangerous. "Lucky for me, I excel at strategy." He waited until the crowd around Justina thinned slightly. Not difficult, as the dancing had started and several of her admirers had been called away by mothers or prior commitments. She stood alone for a moment, and Nick saw her shoulders drop in visible relief. Then Rutherford appeared. Nick felt his whole body tense. 8 years since he'd seen the man face to face. 8 years of watching from afar, gathering information, waiting for the perfect moment. Edmund Blackwell, Marquess of Rutherford, was in his 40s, handsome in a cold, austere way. Dark hair silvering at the temples, sharp features, the bearing of a man who'd never been denied anything in his life. He approached Justina with obvious affection, and she brightened immediately. "Edmund, I was hoping you'd arrive soon. These gentlemen are very persistent." "I can see that." Rutherford's voice was dry. "Weatherby's been sniffing around, I take it?" "He asked if I enjoyed long walks. When I said yes, he suggested I could walk through his estate. All 5,000 acres of it." Justina's nose wrinkled. He smelled like tobacco and desperation. Nick couldn't help it. He laughed. Both Rutherford and Justina turned toward him. The Marquess' eyes narrowed immediately in recognition. Justina just looked curious. This was it, the moment to begin. Nick crossed the distance between them with easy confidence, offering a perfect bow. "Forgive the intrusion. I couldn't help but overhear. 5,000 acres does seem excessive for a simple walk." Justina's lips quirked. "Doesn't it? I suggested a turn around the square might be more practical, but Lord Weatherby seemed quite attached to his acreage." "Most men are. Property makes them feel important." Nick met her eyes directly. "Though in my experience, truly important things can't be measured in acres." Something flickered in her gaze. Surprise, maybe, or interest. Rutherford stepped forward slightly, his voice cool. "I don't believe we've been introduced. I'm..." "The Marquess of Rutherford." Nick's tone was perfectly pleasant. "I know, your reputation precedes you, my lord." The words hung in the air like a blade. Rutherford's eyes went flat. "And you are?" "Nicholas Greyson, Duke of Ashmont." Nick watched the name register, watched Rutherford's expression go very still. "Though I suspect you remember my father. The Earl of Greyson? You did business together some years ago." The silence stretched. Justina looked between them, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding it. "Yes," Rutherford said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "I remember. A terrible tragedy. What happened to your family? You have my condolences." "How kind." Nick's smile didn't reach his eyes, though condolences seem insufficient for such comprehensive losses. "Edmund," Justina touched her brother-in-law's arm. "Is everything all right?" "Perfectly fine, dear." Rutherford recovered smoothly, though his gaze never left Nick's face. Ancient history, nothing more. The Duke and I have no current business together. Not yet. Nick turned his full attention to Justina, deliberately dismissing Rutherford. Lady Justina, I apologize for the awkward introduction. Might I have the honor of the next dance? Unless your card is already full. She blinked, clearly caught off guard. I know. I mean, yes. She took a breath, a faint blush colouring her cheeks. Yes, Your Grace. I'd be delighted. Nick offered his arm. As she took it, he caught Rutherford's expression, cold fury barely masked by social propriety. Perfect. Enjoy your evening, Lord Rutherford. Nick said pleasantly, I'll take excellent care of your sister-in-law. He led Justina toward the dance floor, feeling Rutherford's gaze burning into his back like a brand. The game had begun. You've made quite an impression tonight, Nick said as they took their positions for the waltz. I heard you declared a diamond before the evening was half over. Justina's expression turned wry. Is that what they're calling it? I thought it was more of a cattle auction. He laughed. Genuinely this time. Not enjoying your triumph? Is it a triumph to be stared at like a prize mare, to have men twice my age propose marriage without bothering to learn my name first? She shook her head as the music began. Forgive me, Your Grace. That was rude. That was honest. Refreshing, actually. Nick guided her into the first turn, noting how naturally she followed his lead. Most ladies would simper and pretend to be flattered. I'm a terrible simperer. My sister despairs of me. Lady Rutherford? Yes, Helena's everything I'm not. Graceful, diplomatic, naturally charming. She can convince anyone of anything without them realizing they've been convinced. Justina's voice softened with obvious affection. She's wonderful. And you're not. I'm too blunt, too opinionated. I ask questions I shouldn't and say things ladies aren't supposed to think, let alone speak aloud. She met his eyes directly, a hint of challenge in her gaze. Does that shock you, Your Grace? Not even slightly. Nick spun her through another turn, enjoying the way her eyes widened slightly at the movement. In fact, I find it rather appealing. Beauty and brains, a rare combination. And there it is. Her tone went flat. The part where you compliment my appearance. You'd prefer I didn't? I'd prefer, she said carefully, that someone ask what I think rather than comment on how I look, but I suppose that's too much to hope for. Nick studied her face, the genuine frustration there, the loneliness hiding beneath practiced social graces. Matthews had been right. She was supposed to be a tool, a weapon to wield against Rutherford, but standing here, watching her struggle to maintain composure while clearly dying inside from the superficial attention, he felt something unexpected. Guilt. He crushed it ruthlessly. This was necessary. Justice required sacrifice. All right, then. He adjusted his grip slightly as they moved through the crowd. What do you think about the current state of education reform? Should women be granted access to universities? She stumbled slightly, surprise breaking her careful mask. What? Education reform. It's a topic of some debate in Parliament. I'm curious about your opinion. You actually want to know what I think? I asked, didn't I? For the first time that evening, her smile looked genuine. Yes. Absolutely yes. Women should have access to formal education. The argument that we're intellectually inferior is nonsense. We're simply denied the opportunities to develop those skills. Give women the same education as men, and watch what we accomplish. Radical thinking. Practical thinking. Fire lit her eyes now, all that misery replaced by passion. Half the population is being wasted because some dusty men in Parliament decided centuries ago that women can't handle Latin. It's absurd. Your father must love these opinions. My father, she said dryly, has forbidden me from discussing politics, philosophy, or anything more complex than weather and needlework in public. He thinks my outspokenness will scare away suitable matches. And will it? She met his gaze directly. Yes, and good riddance to them. Nick laughed again, surprising himself. When was the last time he'd genuinely enjoyed a conversation at one of these tedious balls? The waltz was ending too soon. As the final notes played, he escorted her back toward the edge of the ballroom, where her admirers were already circling like sharks. Thank you, Lady Justina. That was unexpectedly delightful. Because I didn't simper. Because you're interesting. He bowed over her hand, his voice low enough that only she could hear. A rare quality in this world of beautiful automatons. The blush that coloured her cheeks was charming. Dangerous, really, how charming. Your Grace, I... She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Thank you, for asking what I thought. No one else has. Their loss. Nick straightened, his expression carefully neutral, even as something uncomfortable twisted in his chest. Enjoy the rest of your evening, my lady. He walked away before she could respond, before he could see the hope in her eyes, before he could question what the hell he was doing. Across the ballroom, Rutherford watched him with cold, calculating eyes. Nick met that gaze steadily and smiled. Let the games begin, he thought. Let's see who destroys whom. But as he left the Havisham ball and climbed into his carriage, he couldn't quite shake the memory of Justina's genuine smile when he'd asked her opinion on education. How was the evening, Your Grace? Matthews asked. Nick stared out the window at London's dark streets. Successful. The plan is in motion. And Lady Justina? Perfect. The word tasted like ash. She's absolutely perfect. Which was, Nick was beginning to realize, going to make this so much worse. Chapter 2. The Diamond Emerges. Lady Justina Barrett woke to the sound of her father counting money. She didn't need to see him to know that's what he was doing. The shuffle of banknotes, the satisfied grunt, the way his chair creaked as he leaned back in triumph. The sounds drifted up from his study below her bedchamber, as predictable as sunrise. Miss Justina? Her lady's maid Annie appeared with morning chocolate. Your father requests your presence in the drawing room, 9 o'clock sharp. Justina sat up, pushing golden hair from her face. What time is it now? 8:30, miss. Wonderful. Just enough time to prepare for whatever fresh hell he's planning. Justina caught Annie's scandalized expression and sighed. Sorry, that was unladylike. It was honest, miss. Annie set the tray down with a gentle smile. And between us, I'd be thinking worse after last night. Last night. The Havisham ball. Her official debut. The night she'd been inspected, evaluated, and appraised like a mare at Tattersall's. How many proposals came this morning? Justina asked, already knowing the answer would be appalling. 6, miss, and a rather alarming poem from Lord Weatherby comparing you to various celestial bodies. Good God. Which ones? All of them, I believe. The man's very thorough, if nothing else. Justina laughed despite herself, then immediately sobered. 6 proposals. 6 men who'd barely spoken to her, who knew nothing about her beyond her face and her connection to the Marquess of Rutherford. 6 men who saw a beautiful investment opportunity and nothing more. Annie, tell me honestly, is this what marriage is? Being sold to the highest bidder? Her maid's expression softened. For ladies like you, miss, with beauty and connections but not enough fortune of your own? Often, yes, though your sister found love despite the odds. Helena's different. She's perfect. Justina reached for the chocolate, needing something to do with her hands. She knows how to navigate society, how to make men feel important while getting exactly what she wants. I just make them uncomfortable. You make them think, miss. That's different than uncomfortable. In society, it's the same thing. Her father was waiting in the drawing room, looking like a cat who'd caught an entire flock of canaries. Sir Gerald Barrett was a knight by purchase rather than deed, a fact that embarrassed Justina more than she'd ever admit aloud. He'd made his modest fortune in trade, respectable enough, but spent the last 20 years desperately trying to climb into the ranks of the nobility. Helena's marriage to Rutherford had been his greatest triumph. Justina's debut was meant to be his encore. Ah, there's my beautiful daughter. He rose as she entered, practically vibrating with excitement. Sit, sit. We have much to discuss. Justina sat, folding her hands in her lap. Good morning, father. Good morning indeed. What a night, eh? What a triumph. He paced the room, too energized to sit. 6 proposals already, and the morning callers haven't even begun. Lord Weatherby, Viscount Pembroke, Sir Thomas Whitfield, all of whom are at least twice my age. Experience and wealth, my dear. Stability. Her father waved this away as if her concerns were gnats. Though I'll admit Weatherby's a bit past his prime, still 20,000 a year is nothing to sneeze at. Justina's stomach turned. You're actually considering him. I'm considering all options. That's good business. He finally stopped pacing, fixing her with a calculating look. But I must say, the most interesting development came at the end of the evening. Something in his tone made her wary. Oh? The Duke of Ashmont danced with you. The memory surfaced unbidden, grey eyes that actually looked at her, questions about education reform instead of compliments about her gown, a smile that seemed genuine rather than practiced. "What do you think about the current state of education reform?" No one else had asked what she thought about anything. "It was one dance, Father. I'm sure His Grace was simply being polite." "Polite?" her father laughed. "My dear girl, dukes are never simply polite. Everything they do is calculated." He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Ashmont is one of the wealthiest men in England. Young, titled, handsome by all accounts. If he's showing interest in you—" "He asked me about education reform and women's universities," Justina interrupted. "I highly doubt that indicates romantic interest." "He asked your opinion?" Her father's face went slightly red. "Good God, Justina, please tell me you didn't share those radical views of yours." "I shared my honest thoughts, yes." "Damn it." He slammed his hand on the desk. "How many times must I tell you? Men don't want wives with opinions. They want wives who are beautiful and agreeable and decorative." Justina felt her own temper rising. "Shall I just stand in the corner and smile prettily? Perhaps you could sell tickets." "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being realistic." She stood, unable to sit still any longer. "You're treating me like property to be auctioned. You don't care who I marry as long as his title and fortune meet your requirements. You don't care if I'm happy." "Of course I care if you're happy." Her father's voice softened, but his eyes remained calculating. "That's why I want you to marry well. Security brings happiness, Justina. Love is a luxury for those who can afford it." Helena got extraordinarily lucky. Lightning doesn't strike twice." He moved closer, his tone turning persuasive. "Listen to me, daughter. You're 20 years old, beautiful, and connected to one of the most powerful men in England through your sister. Right now, you can have your pick of suitors, but beauty fades, and so does opportunity. In 5 years, you'll be past your prime with half the options. In 10 years, I'll be 30 and absolutely withered," Justina said dryly. "Yes, Father, I understand how female value works in the marriage market. You've explained it thoroughly. Then understand this. I'm giving you a choice." He gestured to the stack of letters on his desk. "These 6 men have made formal offers. Review them, consider their merits, and select whichever you prefer. That's more freedom than most girls in your position receive." Justina stared at the letters. 6 proposals. 6 strangers who wanted to marry a beautiful face and useful connection. Not one of them knew she preferred philosophy to poetry, spoke 3 languages, or dreamed of travelling to Greece to see the ancient ruins. Not one had asked. "And if I don't want any of them?" Her father's expression hardened. "Then I'll make the choice for you. Weatherby's offer is extremely generous, and he's agreed to settle the remainder of my debts as part of the marriage contract. That kind of practical arrangement is worth considering." The trap closed around her with the weight of inevitability. Refuse to choose, and she'd be sold to the highest bidder. Choose, and she'd still be selling herself, just with the illusion of control. "How long do I have to decide?" "The season's just begun. Let's say a month." He smiled, clearly thinking himself generous. "That gives you time to entertain other offers, attend more events, see who else might present themselves. Who knows? Perhaps that duke will prove serious. Ashmont would solve all our problems quite nicely." Justina left the drawing room feeling like she was drowning in silk and social expectations. "You look like you need to hit something." Justina turned to find her sister Helena descending the stairs, dressed for morning calls in a gown that probably cost more than most families earned in a year. Marriage to Rutherford had transformed her from comfortable gentry to glittering nobility, but Helena wore it all with effortless grace. "Is it that obvious? Your jaw is clenched, your hands are fists, and you're staring at Father's study door like you're considering arson." Helena linked their arms and steered her toward the morning room. "Come, tell me everything." The morning room was Justina's favourite space in their London house. Bright windows overlooking the square, comfortable furniture that hadn't been chosen for show, and most importantly, privacy. Helena had insisted on it when Rutherford purchased the property for the Barrett family, knowing Justina would need somewhere to escape. 6 proposals, Justina said without preamble. "Father wants me to choose one within a month, or he'll choose for me. The leading candidate is Lord Weatherby, who's 63 and wrote me a poem comparing me to Jupiter. Jupiter specifically, not Venus or Diana? He worked through the entire solar system, apparently. Mars made an appearance in the third stanza. Helena pressed her lips together, clearly fighting a smile. That's thorough. That's horrifying. Justina collapsed into a chair. Helena, I can't do this. I can't marry some stranger who sees me as a decorative acquisition. I want... She stopped, frustrated by her own inability to articulate the longing in her chest. You want what I have, Helena said gently. Love, partnership, someone who knows you. Is that so much to ask? No. Helena sat beside her, taking her hand. But it's rare to find, especially in our world. Most marriages in the ton are business arrangements. People learn to be content, if not happy. I don't want content. Justina's voice broke slightly. I want someone to ask what I'm thinking, to care about my opinions, to see me as more than just a pretty face attached to a useful connection. Helena squeezed her hand. You'll find that person, darling, I promise. Will I? Or will father sell me to Weatherby before I have the chance? Edmund won't let that happen. Helena's voice carried absolute certainty. He adores you, you know, thinks you're brilliant. He won't allow father to force you into a miserable match just to settle his debts. Justina felt her throat tighten with emotion. Rutherford had been unexpectedly wonderful since marrying Helena, generous, protective, genuinely kind. It made father's scheming feel even more mercenary by comparison. Did anyone interesting catch your eye last night? Helena asked, clearly trying to lighten the mood. Besides the astronomical Lord Weatherby? The Duke of Ashmont's face flashed through Justina's mind. Grey eyes that had actually looked at her. Questions about education that suggested he thought she had a brain worth engaging. Beauty and brains, a rare combination. There was one gentleman who seemed different. Helena's eyes lit up. Oh, tell me everything. It's nothing, really. We had one dance. He asked my opinion on women's education and didn't seem horrified when I answered honestly. Justina tried to sound casual and failed completely. The Duke of Ashmont. Helena's expression shifted, something Justina couldn't quite read. Surprise? Concern? Ashmont? Nicholas Greyson? You know him? I know of him. Helena chose her words carefully. He's wealthy, titled, and rather notorious for being ruthless in business. Edmund mentioned him once. Edmund knows him? They've had dealings in the past. Helena's tone suggested those dealings weren't pleasant, but she clearly didn't want to elaborate. What was your impression of him? Justina thought back to the dance, the way Ashmont had dismissed Rutherford with barely concealed hostility, the tension between them that she'd sensed but not understood. He was intelligent, witty. He treated me like a person instead of a pretty object, which was refreshing. She hesitated, though there was something between him and Edmund, some kind of tension. Old business rivalry, probably. Edmund has a complicated past. Helena said this lightly, but her eyes remained serious. Be careful with Ashmont, darling. Men like him, brilliant, wealthy, charming, they're dangerous precisely because they're so appealing. You're assuming he's interested in me. Every man with eyes is interested in you. The question is why? Helena stood, smoothing her skirts. Just promise me you'll be cautious. Don't let charm blind you to character, as opposed to letting father's greed blind me to character. Helena smiled sadly. Fair point. Come, we have morning callers to endure. Might as well face the suitor parade together. The morning callers were exactly as terrible as Justina expected. Lord Weatherby arrived first, bearing flowers and reciting yet another poem, this one comparing her hair to spun gold more precious than Apollo's chariot. Justina maintained a polite smile while mentally calculating how quickly she could flee to Greece. Viscount Pembroke came next, a pleasant enough man of 40 who spent the entire visit discussing his country estate's drainage systems. Fascinating. Sir Thomas Whitfield brought chocolates and talked exclusively about his late wife, occasionally tearing up and calling Justina by the wrong name. By the fourth caller, a baron who couldn't seem to meet her eyes and addressed all his comments to her bosom, Justina was ready to fake an illness and escape to her room. Perhaps we should take a brief respite, Helena suggested tactfully. Allow the gentleman to... Lady Justina Barrett, the butler appeared in the doorway. The Duke of Ashmont has called. Justina's heart did something complicated. Helena shot her a meaningful look. "Show him in," Justina said, trying to sound casual. The Duke of Ashmont entered the drawing room like he owned it, confident, elegant, and completely at ease. He was even more striking in daylight, with his dark hair and grey eyes that seemed to see everything. "Lady Rutherford, Lady Justina." He bowed with perfect propriety. "Forgive the intrusion. I was in the neighbourhood and thought I'd pay my respects after last evening's delightful encounter." "In the neighbourhood?" Helena's tone was pleasant but sceptical. "How fortunate." "Isn't it?" Ashmont's smile didn't waver. "I had business with my solicitor 2 streets over. Pure coincidence." Liar, Justina thought, but a charming liar. "Please sit." She gestured to a chair. "Would you care for tea?" "Tea would be lovely, thank you." He settled into the chair with casual grace, somehow making the formal morning call feel intimate. "I hope you recovered from last night's festivities. I imagine being declared a diamond is rather exhausting." "It's exactly as exhausting as being inspected by every fortune hunter in London," Justina said, then immediately regretted her bluntness. "Forgive me, Your Grace. That was honest?" he smiled. "I value honesty. Refreshing quality in the ton." Helena was watching this exchange with obvious interest. "Lord Weatherby called earlier. I understand he sent poetry?" "Comparing me to celestial bodies," Justina confirmed. "All of them." "Ambitious." Ashmont's eyes danced with humour. "Did he at least avoid Uranus?" "That one's tricky to rhyme tastefully." Justina laughed, a real genuine laugh that surprised her. "He stuck to the classics, thankfully." "Wise man. Though I question the romantic appeal of comparing one's beloved to Jupiter, gas giant seems an unfortunate choice." "Perhaps he was commenting on my expansive personality, or your gravity that draws all nearby objects into your orbit." Ashmont leaned forward slightly. "Though that might actually be accurate. You certainly drew quite a crowd last night." The compliment was clever enough to feel earned rather than empty. Justina found herself smiling despite her earlier exhaustion. Helena cleared her throat gently. "Your Grace, I understand you knew my husband some years ago?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Ashmont's expression remained pleasant, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "We had business dealings, yes, ancient history. Edmund speaks well of you. How generous of him." Ashmont's tone suggested he didn't believe this for a second. "I hope the Marquess is well?" "Very well, thank you." Helena's voice carried a subtle warning. He's quite devoted to family, as all good men should be. The subtext flying between them was thick enough to cut with a knife. Justina looked from Ashmont to her sister, trying to decode the silent conversation. "Forgive me," Justina interrupted, "but is there some tension I'm not aware of? You both sound extraordinarily polite, which in my experience means you're extraordinarily angry." Ashmont blinked, then laughed, genuine surprise breaking through his careful mask. "You're observant." "I'm not blind or stupid." She kept her tone light but firm. "If there's some conflict between you and my brother-in-law, I'd rather know now than discover it later through embarrassing rumours." Helena looked pained. Ashmont studied Justina with something like respect. "There's no conflict," he said finally, "merely complicated history. Your brother-in-law and I conducted business years ago that ended poorly. These things happen. We've both moved on." It wasn't the whole truth, Justina could tell, but it also wasn't exactly a lie. "Moved on enough to attend balls and pay morning calls?" she asked. "Moved on enough to recognize that you are not your brother-in-law, and therefore shouldn't be punished for old grudges." Ashmont met her eyes directly. "I came here to see you, Lady Justina, not to wage ancient wars." Her breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. Helena shifted uncomfortably. "I should check on the refreshments," her sister said, standing with obvious reluctance. "Excuse me a moment." The drawing-room door closed, leaving Justina alone with Ashmont. Technically improper, but with servants nearby and the door open a crack, just barely acceptable. "You orchestrated that," Justina said. "I did no such thing. Your sister's concern for proper hospitality orchestrated that." "You're very smooth, Your Grace. I have many talents," he smiled, including recognizing when a lady needs rescuing from planetary poetry and drainage system discussions. "You were listening? I may have delayed my entrance to assess the competition." Ashmont's expression turned serious. "Forgive my bluntness, but you looked utterly miserable with those other callers. I thought perhaps a more engaging conversation might be welcome." You're very sure of yourself. No, I'm very sure that you're too intelligent to enjoy being treated like a decorative object. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. Last night you mentioned wanting someone to ask your thoughts instead of commenting on your appearance. So here's a question. What do you want, Lady Justina? Not what your father wants, not what society expects. What do you want? No one had ever asked her that. Not her father, not her suitors, not even Helena. Just this man with complicated history and dangerous eyes who looked at her like she was a puzzle worth solving. I want. Justina's voice came out softer than intended. I want to matter, to be valued for my mind and not just my face. I want conversations that challenge me and a partner who sees me as an equal. I want. She stopped, suddenly embarrassed by her own honesty. Someone who actually knows you, Ashmont finished quietly. Not the diamond, you. Yes, the word barely a whisper. Something passed between them, a moment of genuine connection that made Justina's pulse race. Ashmont's eyes softened, and for just a second his careful mask slipped. Then Helena returned with the tea service, and the moment shattered. Discussing anything scandalous? Her sister asked lightly. Only drainage systems, Ashmont said smoothly, accepting a cup. Riveting topic. The rest of the visit passed in pleasant small talk, books they'd read, upcoming social events, harmless gossip about the ton. But Justina couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted. When Ashmont finally rose to leave, he bowed over her hand with perfect propriety. Lady Justina, would you do me the honour of a ride in Hyde Park tomorrow morning? I understand you walk there regularly. I thought perhaps a change of perspective might be enjoyable. Her father would be thrilled, a duke showing clear interest. Helena looked concerned, but resigned. Justina should probably refuse, should maintain proper distance, should protect herself from whatever complicated game this man was playing. I'd be delighted, Your Grace. His smile was brilliant and completely devastating. Excellent. I'll call for you at 10. After he left, Helena immediately turned to her. Justina, I know. He's dangerous, charming, and I should be careful. Justina sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. But did you hear him, Helena? Did you hear the questions he asked? I did. He's the only man who's asked what I want, not what I look like. Not what my dowry is, not which flowers I prefer, what I want. Justina met her sister's worried gaze. Maybe he's manipulating me. Maybe this is all some elaborate scheme. But for one morning, can't I pretend someone actually sees me? Helena's expression softened with understanding and sadness. Oh, darling, just be careful with your heart. Men like Ashmont are very good at making women feel seen. Is that what Edmund did to you? Edmund was different. He never pretended to be anything but what he was. Helena squeezed her hand. Just promise me you'll remember that charm and genuine interest aren't always the same thing. I promise. But that night, lying in bed, Justina couldn't stop thinking about grey eyes and dangerous questions. What do you want? She wanted someone to see her, to know her, to value her mind as much as her face. And for one brief, terrifying moment in that drawing room, the Duke of Ashmont had looked at her like he might actually understand. It was probably a lie, probably manipulation, probably exactly what Helena warned against. But God help her, she wanted it to be real. Chapter 3. The Chance Encounters. Nick's stallion was perfectly trained. Apollo had never spooked at anything in his entire well-bred life. Not carriages, not dogs, not even the time a street vendor's cart had collapsed directly in front of them in a spectacular shower of apples, which made what Nick was about to do feel particularly dishonest. Forgive me, old boy, he murmured, checking the park path for the third time. 10 o'clock. Justina walked here every Tuesday and Thursday. His sources were impeccable. Apollo flicked his ears backward, supremely uninterested in Nick's moral crisis. I'm orchestrating a dramatic rescue that doesn't need rescuing, Nick explained to the horse. It's manipulative and calculating, and I'm aware that talking to my horse about it doesn't make it better. Apollo snorted. Exactly. The morning was crisp and bright, Hyde Park dotted with fashionable riders and determined walkers. Nick had positioned himself near the Serpentine, where the path curved and trees provided convenient cover, the perfect spot for a chance encounter. Except now, waiting, he felt ridiculous. This was the plan. Seduce Justina, ruin her, destroy Rutherford through her pain. Simple, effective, justice for his family. So why did his chest feel tight when he remembered her voice in the drawing room yesterday? I want to matter, to be valued for my mind and not just my face. Your Grace? His groom, Tom, appeared from behind a nearby oak. The lady's approaching. 2 minutes, I'd wager. Excellent. Nick gathered Apollo's reins. Remember, when I give the signal, drop the lead rope and shout. Loud enough to startle him, not loud enough to actually panic him. Tom's weathered face creased with doubt. Begging your pardon, sir, but this seems an awful lot of trouble for a conversation. I prefer to make memorable first impressions. You already made a first impression, at the ball and the morning call. Then I'm making a memorable third impression. Nick adjusted his seat, scanning the path. There, a flash of blue muslin, golden hair catching sunlight. Positions, Tom, and for God's sake, look convincing. Justina saw the accident unfold with perfect theatrical timing. The Duke of Ashmont was riding a magnificent black stallion along the parallel path when suddenly a shout from his groom, the horse rearing. Ashmont struggling for control as the animal danced sideways directly toward where Justina stood frozen. Her maid Annie shrieked and stumbled backward. Justina's heart hammered as 1,200 pounds of horse flesh came far too close, hooves flashing. Then Ashmont had Apollo under control, wheeling him away with expert horsemanship, his body between the horse and Justina. The stallion settled almost immediately, prancing but calm. Good God! Ashmont dismounted in one smooth motion, handing the reins to his groom and rushing toward Justina. Lady Justina, are you hurt? I'm so terribly sorry. I'm fine, Justina said, hand pressed to her racing heart. Truly, just startled. Are you certain? His hands hovered near her shoulders, not quite touching, but close enough that she felt the warmth. He's never spooked like that before. Something must have frightened him. Perhaps a snake, or your Grace. Justina met his eyes, seeing the concern there. Also seeing something else, a flicker of calculation quickly hidden. Your horse is perfectly calm now, and I noticed he settled rather quickly for an animal supposedly terrified of snakes. Ashmont went very still. I'm not sure I follow. I'm not sure you don't. Justina tilted her head, studying him. That was very conveniently timed, almost as if someone knew I walked here Tuesday mornings. Behind them, the groom made a strangled sound. Annie was trying very hard not to smile. Ashmont's expression shifted through several emotions: surprise, embarrassment, resignation, and finally rueful amusement. How long have you known? Since approximately the second shout. Your groom's timing was excellent, but Apollo didn't actually seem distressed. Also, Justina gestured to the horse, who was now calmly nibbling grass. Snakes in Hyde Park in March? Really, Your Grace. You could have chosen a more plausible excuse. I could have. Ashmont ran a hand through his dark hair, genuinely abashed. In my defense, I wasn't expecting you to be quite so observant. Most people don't expect women to notice anything beyond fashion and gossip. Most people are fools. He looked at her with something like respect. I apologize for the theatrics. I wanted an excuse to speak with you privately, and a dramatic rescue seemed... romantic? Memorable. Justina couldn't help smiling. It would have worked beautifully if I were less cynical. Note to self, Lady Justina Barrett is dangerously perceptive and should not be underestimated. You're making notes about me? Mental ones. His smile turned charming. Since my dramatic rescue failed, might I walk with you instead? I promise no more staged emergencies. Justina knew she should refuse. Helena's warnings echoed in her mind. Charm and genuine interest aren't always the same thing. This man had just proven he was willing to manipulate situations to get what he wanted, but he'd also asked what she wanted yesterday. And now he was looking at her with genuine embarrassment instead of practiced seduction. Annie, you may follow at a discreet distance, Justina said. Her maid nodded, clearly delighted by the drama. Ashmont offered his arm. Justina took it, trying to ignore how solid and warm he felt through the fabric of his coat. They began walking along the serpentine, Apollo following docilely behind with the groom. So, Justina said after a moment, do you often stage accidents to speak with ladies? You're my first. I'm open to feedback on the execution. Less shouting, more subtle chaos, perhaps a conveniently dropped glove? A glove? How pedestrian. Helena was waiting when Justina returned home, her expression caught between amused and concerned. Annie tells me the Duke staged a rescue that you immediately saw through. Justina removed her bonnet, fighting a smile. Apollo's a terrible actor, far too calm for a horse allegedly terrified of snakes. And yet you walked with him anyway. He apologized and invited me to view his library tomorrow. Justina met her sister's worried gaze. With you as chaperone before you panic. I'm not panicking. Helena sighed. Justina, darling, be careful. Men who stage elaborate schemes to spend time with you are either desperately in love or dangerously calculating. Which do you think Ashmont is? I don't know. That's what worries me. Helena took her hands. Edmund asked about him last night, about why the Duke is suddenly showing interest in you. Justina's stomach clenched. What did Edmund say? That Ashmont's brilliant but ruthless, that their past business was complicated, that I should— Helena hesitated. That I should watch out for you. Did he forbid it? No. Edmund knows I can't forbid you from seeing anyone, and honestly, Ashmont's better than Weatherby or his ilk. Helena squeezed her hands. Just keep your eyes open, yes? Don't let charm blind you to character. I won't. Justina meant it. She understood the risk. But God, it was nice to feel seen. 3 days later, Justina stood in Hatchard's bookshop, completely absorbed in a translation of Plato's Republic, when a familiar voice said, Careful, that particular translation has several controversial interpretations. She looked up to find Nick leaning against the shelf, looking unfairly handsome in morning clothes. Are you following me, Your Grace? Coincidence. His smile was absolutely unrepentant. I often browse here on Friday mornings. How convenient that I also browse here on Friday mornings. Isn't it? Almost like fate. Justina closed the book, or like someone asked my maid about my weekly schedule. Would I do something so underhanded? In a heartbeat. Fair assessment. Nick moved closer, examining the books surrounding her. Though in my defense, I genuinely do shop here. The philosophy section is excellent. And you just happened to arrive exactly when I did. I may have timed my arrival carefully. He plucked a book from the shelf. This translation's better. The footnotes actually explain the cultural context instead of just making pompous academic observations. Justina took the offered book, their fingers brushing. That same electric awareness sparked through her. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Doing what? Orchestrating these encounters. The park, now here. You're a duke. You could court me properly through formal calls and chaperoned visits. Why the subterfuge? Nick was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. When he spoke, his voice was honest in a way that made her chest tight. Because proper courtship means sitting in drawing rooms, making small talk while your father evaluates my financial prospects and your sister monitors every word. It means performing instead of connecting. He met her eyes. I want to know you, Justina, the real you, not the diamond performing for the ton. That requires actual conversation, which requires privacy, or at least the illusion of it. Precisely. Someone should have told her heart to stop racing. It didn't listen. I haven't forgotten that you and Edmund have complicated history, Justina said, that you dismissed him rather coldly at the ball, that there's something you're not telling me. Nick's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. There is history between your brother-in-law and myself, old business that ended poorly. But I meant what I said, Justina. You're not him. Whatever anger I have toward Rutherford has nothing to do with you. It wasn't the full truth. Justina could tell. But it wasn't exactly a lie either. If you're using me to hurt Edmund, I'm not. Nick's voice was firm. I'm interested in you because you're brilliant and fascinating, and you look at the world with fresh eyes instead of jaded cynicism. Whatever else is true, that's true as well. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. Show me which philosophy books you'd recommend, Justina said instead of addressing the flutter of hope in her chest. If you're going to stalk me in bookshops, you might as well be useful. Nick's smile was relief and delight mixed. Demanding. I approve. They spent the next hour wandering the shop, debating translations and arguing good-naturedly about Aristotle versus Plato. Nick was wickedly smart and genuinely engaged, asking her opinions and listening to her answers like they mattered. When they finally left, separately to preserve propriety, Justina carried 3 new books and a dangerous warmth in her chest. Annie waited outside with the carriage, her expression knowing. Coincidence, was it, miss? Apparently the Duke shops here every Friday. Very convenient, isn't it? Justina climbed into the carriage, unable to stop smiling. She was being manipulated. She knew it. But she was also being seen and heard and valued for her mind. Was it so wrong to want both to be true? The Pemberton Musicale was supposed to be deadly dull. Amateur performances by hopeful debutantes whose parents had more ambition than musical talent. Justina attended because refusal would have been rude. She settled into her seat beside Helena, preparing to endure 2 hours of off-key soprano and questionable pianoforte. Then Nick slid into the seat beside her. "You have got to be joking," Justina whispered. "Completely serious. I love musicales." His expression was absolutely deadpan. "You're lying." "I am, but I heard you'd be here, and sitting through bad music seemed a small price to pay for your company." Helena leaned forward, raising an eyebrow. "Your Grace. What a surprise." "Lady Rutherford. Delightful as always." Nick's smile was charming and completely shameless. "I hope you don't mind me joining you. The ballroom's rather crowded." "Of course not," Helena said, though her tone suggested she minded very much. The first performance began, a young lady murdering a Mozart sonata. Justina winced. Beside her, Nick made a small sound of pain. "Is she playing with mittens on?" he whispered. Justina bit her lip to stop laughing. "Shh! No, seriously, I think she's wearing mittens. That would explain the muffled quality." "Your Grace. Perhaps she's playing an entirely different piece, and we're all too polite to mention it." Justina's shoulders shook with suppressed laughter. Helena shot them both a warning look. The performance mercifully ended. Polite applause rippled through the room. The next performer, Lord Weatherby's niece, approached the pianoforte with grim determination. "Oh God," Justina breathed. "She's going to sing." "I should have brought a flask." Scandalous. Practical. The niece began singing something that might have been Handel but sounded like cats fighting. Nick leaned closer, his breath warm against Justina's ear. "If we leave now, we could escape to the terrace. Fresh air, silence, the absence of musical torture. That would be incredibly rude. That would be self-preservation." Justina knew she shouldn't. Knew disappearing with Nick would cause gossip. Knew Helena would disapprove. But Lord Weatherby's niece hit a note that made Justina's teeth ache. "5 minutes," she whispered, "then we return." Nick's smile was victory and mischief. 5 minutes. They slipped out during the applause, Helena's pointed stare burning into Justina's back. The terrace was blissfully quiet, cool air a relief after the stuffy ballroom. Justina breathed deep, tilting her face toward the night sky. "I needed that," she admitted. "One more soprano and I might have screamed. You and me both." Nick leaned against the balustrade, studying her. "Though I should probably confess, the music was only partly why I came tonight." "Oh, what was the other reason?" "You looked miserable at the last 3 social events. I thought perhaps rescuing you from musical torture might improve your week." Something warm bloomed in Justina's chest. "That's actually rather sweet." "Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation for cold ruthlessness to maintain." "Your secret's safe with me." Justina moved to stand beside him, looking out over the dark garden. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why me? You're a duke. You could court any woman in London. Why pursue someone whose brother-in-law you clearly dislike?" Nick was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an honesty that felt dangerous. "Because you're the first person in 8 years who's made me feel something besides anger. Because when you talk about philosophy or defend your opinions, your eyes light up and the world feels less grey. Because—" he stopped, jaw clenching. "Because I started this thinking one thing, and now I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore." Justina's breath caught. "Started what?" "Justina." Nick turned to face her fully, something raw in his expression. "If I told you I had ulterior motives when I first sought you out, would you walk away?" Her heart hammered. "That depends. Do you still have ulterior motives?" "I don't know." He reached out, fingers barely brushing her cheek. "All I know is that every time I'm near you, the plan matters less, and this—" his thumb traced her jawline— "this matters more. Justina should step back, should demand answers, should protect herself from whatever game this was." Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Scared this is real and scared it's not." "Me too," Nick admitted. From inside, the music ended. Applause. They had perhaps 30 seconds before someone noticed their absence. "We should go back," Justina said, not moving. "We should." Nick didn't move either. For one perfect, terrible moment, they stood there, close enough to kiss, too scared to close the distance. Then Helena's voice called from the doorway. "Justina?" They stepped apart like guilty children. Helena's expression was knowing and concerned. "The performance has ended. People are noticing your absence." "Of course." Justina smoothed her skirts, trying to calm her racing heart. "We were just... I know exactly what you were doing." Helena's tone was gentle but firm. "Inside. Now. Both of you." They returned to the musicale, sitting properly apart while the final performances droned on, but Justina's skin still tingled where Nick had touched her, and when their eyes met across the room, she saw the same confusion and longing reflected back. This was dangerous, possibly destructive, definitely real. That night, alone in her room, Justina pressed her fingers to her cheek where Nick had touched her. "I started this thinking one thing, and now I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore." What had he started? What plan? Helena's warnings echoed, Edmund's cold disapproval, her own instincts screaming that something wasn't quite right. But then she remembered Nick's laugh in the bookshop, the way he'd suffered through terrible music just to be near her, the raw honesty in his voice on the terrace. He was lying about something, she was almost certain, but he was also telling the truth about something else. The question was, which truth mattered more? Chapter 4. The Seduction That Backfires. Nick stood in his study at 2 a.m, staring at the ledger that had started everything. Barrett family connections. Father, Sir Gerald Barrett. Sisters, Helena, married to Rutherford. Justina, unmarried, 20. Weaknesses, father's debts, Justina's debut season, Rutherford's devotion to Helena. He'd written those notes 6 weeks ago with cold satisfaction. The plan had been elegant. Seduce Justina, propose, marry, then orchestrate a scandal spectacular enough to destroy her reputation and Rutherford's happiness in one devastating blow. Simple. Clean. Just. So why did his hand shake when he reached for his pen to add new observations? Justina. Reads Greek philosophy, hates needlepoint, wants to matter more than she wants to be beautiful, defends her brother-in-law with touching loyalty, makes me laugh when I've forgotten how. Makes me feel, Nick crossed out the last line viciously, Your Grace? Matthews appeared in the doorway, impeccably dressed despite the ungodly hour. Forgive the intrusion, but I noticed the light. Are you well? Perfectly well. Nick closed the ledger. Just reviewing accounts. At 2 a.m? Insomnia. Matthews moved into the room, his expression knowing. How is Lady Justina? Intelligent, witty, frustratingly perceptive. Nick ran a hand through his hair. She saw through my staged rescue in Hyde Park immediately. Did she now? Matthew's lips quirked. And yet she walked with you anyway. Yes, curious, isn't it? Nick stared at the closed ledger. Matthews, tell me honestly, am I becoming a villain? That depends, Your Grace. Are you still planning to ruin an innocent young woman to punish her brother-in-law? The words hung in the air like an accusation. The plan was sound, Nick said quietly. Rutherford destroyed my family. He deserves to suffer. He does, Matthews agreed. But does Lady Justina? No. The admission tasted like ash, but revenge rarely limits itself to the deserving. Then perhaps, Matthews said carefully, revenge is the wrong path entirely. Nick wanted to argue, wanted to defend 8 years of planning, of careful strategy, of justified rage. Instead, he remembered Justina's face on the terrace, her whispered confession, I'm scared this is real and scared it's not. It's too late to turn back now, Nick said. The courtship's begun, society's watching. If I withdraw suddenly, her reputation suffers anyway. Then caught her honestly. Matthews met his eyes. Abandon the revenge, win her fairly. And Rutherford gets away with everything he did? Rutherford is Edmund Blackwell's problem, not yours. Lady Justina is becoming yours. Matthews moved toward the door, then paused. The question isn't whether you can destroy her, Your Grace. It's whether you still want to. After he left, Nick sat alone in the dark, staring at the ledger. He didn't have an answer. The following evening, Nick escorted Justina and Helena to the theatre for a performance of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. Sir Gerald had been invited but declined. Business matters, which everyone knew meant gambling debts. Rutherford was conspicuously absent as well, claiming parliamentary obligations. Nick suspected the Marquess was deliberately avoiding him. Smart man. I haven't seen this performed in years, Justina said as they settled into the Ashmont box. Do you prefer the comedies or tragedies, Your Grace? Nick, he corrected gently, and it depends on my mood. Tonight, comedy seems appropriate. Why tonight specifically? Because I'm sitting with the two most beautiful women in London, and tragedy would be a waste of the occasion. Helena made a sound suspiciously like a snort. Justina rolled her eyes. That was appallingly smooth, she said. You've been practicing. For hours. Did it work? Not even slightly. Devastating. I'll try harder next time. The lights dimmed, cutting off Justina's response, but Nick caught her smile in the shadows, and something warm settled in his chest. The performance was excellent. The actors sharp, the comedy landing perfectly. Nick found himself watching Justina more than the stage, noting how she laughed at the witty exchanges, how her eyes lit up during Beatrice's speeches about refusing to submit to men's expectations. She's magnificent. Justina whispered during one particularly fierce monologue. Listen to how she refuses to be diminished. Nick leaned closer. Reminds me of someone. Oh? Who? You. When you told Lord Weatherby that comparing women to livestock was unacceptable even in poetry. Justina's laugh was quiet but genuine. I was rather blunt, wasn't I? You were honest. There's a difference. During the intermission, they remained in the box while Helena went to greet friends. The theatre buzzed with gossip and social manoeuvring, the ton at its most visible. There's Lady Pemberton, Justina observed, nodding toward a box across the theatre. She looks furious. Her daughter just performed at that musicale, probably still recovering from the trauma. Nick, that's cruel. It's accurate. The girl has many talents, I'm sure. Music is not among them. Justina tried to look disapproving and failed. You're terrible. I'm honest. You said there's a difference. She was about to respond when a commotion below drew their attention. An elderly woman in unfashionable dress had entered the theatre and was being mocked by a group of young debutantes, Lord Weatherby's niece among them. Good heavens, look at her gown, one girl said loudly. Is that from last century? Perhaps she's confused about which year it is, another added, to cruel laughter. The elderly woman's face went pale. She clutched her reticule and tried to move past them, but the girls blocked her path, giggling. Nick felt his jaw tighten. Spoiled brats. Beside him, Justina had gone very still. He recognized that look. She was about to do something. Justina, but she was already moving, sweeping out of the box and down the stairs with remarkable speed. Nick followed, curious and slightly alarmed. He arrived just as Justina reached the group of debutantes. Lady Ashford. Justina's voice carried perfectly, warm, delighted, loud enough for half the theatre to hear. How wonderful to see you. I was just telling my sister how much I admired your gown at the Havisham ball last season. So elegant and refined. The elderly woman, apparently Lady Ashford, looked startled. I thank you, dear, but I don't believe we've. Lady Justina Barrett. Justina curtsied gracefully. We were introduced briefly. I'm sure you don't remember. You were surrounded by admirers all evening. She turned to the debutantes with a smile that could cut glass. Girls, you must learn from Lady Ashford. True elegance never goes out of fashion, unlike cruelty, which has always been terribly gauche. The debutantes went red. Weatherby's niece stammered something about a misunderstanding. Of course, Justina said pleasantly. I'm sure you weren't actually mocking Lady Ashford's appearance. That would be unspeakably rude, and your families are far too well-bred for such behaviour. The implication was clear. Behave, or I'll make sure everyone knows you weren't well-bred at all. The girls scattered like startled birds. Lady Ashford's eyes glistened. That was very kind, my dear, though I'm afraid we haven't actually met. Then allow me to properly introduce myself. Justina took the woman's arm gently. Would you care to sit with us? The Duke of Ashmont's box has excellent seats, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the performance. Nick, who'd been watching this entire exchange with growing admiration, stepped forward. Lady Ashford, I'm Nicholas Greyson, Duke of Ashmont. It would be an honour to have you join us. The elderly woman looked between them, clearly overwhelmed. I couldn't possibly impose. You're not imposing. You're rescuing me from discussing drainage systems with Lord Pemberton if he appears. Nick offered his arm. Please, I insist. They settled Lady Ashford in the box with tea and gentle conversation. Helena returned, assessed the situation with one glance, and immediately made the woman feel welcome. "You studied in Florence?" Justina was asking, genuinely fascinated. "What was it like?" "Wonderful, though I'm afraid my family thought it terribly scandalous. Young women didn't travel for education in those days." Lady Ashford smiled wistfully. "I've often thought how different my life might have been if I'd been born in a more progressive era." "It's still not very progressive," Justina said ruefully, "though some of us are trying." "I can see that, dear. You remind me of myself at your age, all fire and opinions." Lady Ashford patted her hand. "Don't let them dim that light. The world needs women who refuse to be diminished." After the performance, Nick insisted on escorting Lady Ashford to her carriage. The elderly woman thanked them profusely, clearly moved by the unexpected kindness. As they watched her drive away, Helena excused herself to speak with an acquaintance, leaving Nick and Justina alone in the theatre's entrance hall. "That was extraordinary," Nick said quietly. Justina looked confused. "What was?" "What you did, defending her, making those cruel girls ashamed without publicly humiliating them, giving Lady Ashford dignity instead of pity. It was nothing. It wasn't nothing." Nick turned to face her fully. It was compassion and intelligence perfectly combined. You saw someone vulnerable, assessed the situation, and acted immediately to protect her, without hesitation, without concern for your own social standing. Justina's cheeks flushed. Those girls were being horrible. Someone had to say something. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have looked away, grateful it wasn't happening to them. Nick realized he was staring and didn't care. "You're remarkable, Justina. Genuinely remarkable." "I'm really not. You are." He caught her hand before he could stop himself. "You defend people who can't defend themselves. You speak your mind even when it's inconvenient. You see the world as it should be and refuse to accept it as it is." His voice dropped. "You make me want to be better than I am." Justina's breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around his. "Nick, Your Grace, Lady Justina." Sir Gerald's voice shattered the moment. He bustled toward them, clearly having come from his club. "Excellent timing. I need to speak with both of you about—" He stopped, noticing their joined hands. A calculating gleam entered his eyes. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately." Nick released Justina's hand reluctantly. "Of course, Sir Gerald." They moved to a quieter corner. Helena reappeared, her expression wary. "Your Grace," Sir Gerald began, barely containing his excitement. "I'll be direct. You've been courting my daughter for several weeks now. Your intentions have been clear to everyone in society. I think it's time we discussed the next steps." Justina's face went pale. "Father, hush, dear. This is business." Sir Gerald focused on Nick. "I'm prepared to accept your suit, Your Grace. Justina's dowry is modest, but her connections through Lord Rutherford are excellent. I believe we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement." Nick felt sick. This man was selling his daughter like a prize mare, and he was supposed to play along, supposed to propose, secure the engagement, and then destroy her. The plan, the revenge. 8 years of careful strategy culminating in this moment. Except now, looking at Justina's miserable face, he couldn't remember why any of it had mattered. "Sir Gerald," Nick said carefully, "I appreciate your directness. However, I believe this conversation should include Lady Justina's preferences. This is, after all, her future we're discussing." Sir Gerald waved this away. "Justina knows her duty. Justina knows her own mind," Nick interrupted, his voice hardening. "And I'd very much like to hear what she wants before making any arrangements." Justina stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Helena looked equally shocked. "Well," Sir Gerald recovered quickly. Of course. Justina, dear, what do you think?" What she thought was clearly complicated and terrified and hopeful all at once. Nick watched emotions flicker across her face. Fear, longing, doubt, desire. "I think," she said slowly, "that I'd like to speak with His Grace privately, if that's acceptable." "Highly irregular. It's acceptable," Nick said firmly. "Lady Rutherford can chaperone. We'll use one of the theatre's private rooms." Sir Gerald looked like he wanted to argue but recognized he'd already pushed his luck. "Very well, but don't take too long. We have much to discuss." The private room was small and elegant, furnished for wealthy patrons who needed discreet spaces for business or assignations. Helena positioned herself near the door, far enough to give them privacy, but close enough to maintain propriety. "Your father is charming," Nick said dryly. "He's a mercenary." Justina paced the small space, her distress evident. "I'm so sorry. He had no right to ambush you like that." "He had every right. I've been courting you publicly for weeks. Society expects a proposal." Nick leaned against the mantel, watching her. "The question is, what do you expect?" Justina stopped pacing. "What do you mean?" "I mean that your father's right. My intentions have been clear. I've pursued you deliberately and consistently, but I've never actually asked what you want from this." He moved closer. "So I'm asking now. What do you want, Justina?" She looked at him with those blue eyes that saw too much. "The truth. I want to know if this is real. If you genuinely care for me, or if I'm—" her voice broke slightly. "If I'm just convenient. A pretty solution to whatever you're planning." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "What makes you think I'm planning something? Because you're too perfect." Justina's words tumbled out. "You ask the right questions, say the right things, appear at exactly the right moments. You're either genuinely interested in me, which seems impossible, or you're playing some elaborate game, and I can't tell which." Nick felt his carefully constructed walls crumble. She deserved the truth, but the truth would destroy everything. "Justina, just tell me one thing." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "When you look at me, do you see me, or do you see what I can give you?" The question was a knife to the chest, because the honest answer was both. He saw her, brilliant, compassionate, fascinating, but he also saw the weapon she could be against Rutherford, the justice she represented, the revenge she made possible. Except somewhere along the way, the first part had become more important than the second. "I see you," Nick said quietly. "I see a woman who's too intelligent for the world she's been forced into, who defends the vulnerable and speaks her mind and refuses to perform for anyone's benefit. I see someone who makes me laugh and challenges my assumptions and makes me want to be honest when I've spent years hiding behind strategy." He stepped closer, his voice raw. "I see you, Justina, more clearly than I've seen anything in 8 years." A tear slipped down her cheek. But I'm not." He stopped, the confession catching in his throat. "I'm not the man you think I am. I've done things, planned things that you'd hate if you knew. I'm trying to be better, trying to deserve you, but I don't know if I can." Justina reached up, her hand cupping his cheek with devastating gentleness. "Then tell me the truth. Whatever it is. Let me decide if you're worth forgiving." Nick closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. He should tell her everything. The plan, the revenge, how he'd meant to use her and destroy her. But the words wouldn't come, because telling her meant losing her, and he'd just realized he couldn't bear that. "I can't," he whispered. "Not yet, but I promise you." He opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. "I promise I won't hurt you. Whatever else happens, whatever I've planned, I won't let you be hurt by it." It was a lie, or close enough to one. Because if Rutherford discovered the truth, Justina would be hurt regardless of Nick's intentions. But she nodded, accepting his promise even though it was incomplete. "Ask me properly," she said softly. "If you're going to do this, ask me properly. Not because my father demanded it or because society expects it, because you want to." Nick's heart hammered. This was the moment, the culmination of weeks of planning, except it wasn't about revenge anymore. He took her hands, his thumbs stroking her knuckles gently. "Lady Justina Barrett, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife, not because your father wants it or because society expects it, but because I can't imagine my future without you in it, because you've become the most important person in my world and I want to spend every day proving I'm worthy of you." Justina's tears spilled over. "You're asking if I'll marry you? I'm begging you to marry me. There's a difference." She laughed through her tears. "Yes! Yes! Yes, you idiot. Yes, I'll marry you." Nick pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. Over her shoulder, he saw Helena's troubled expression. She knew something was wrong, knew he wasn't being honest. But Justina was smiling against his chest, her arms around his waist, and Nick felt something crack inside him that had been frozen for 8 years. He'd meant to propose as part of a plan. Instead, he'd proposed because he couldn't imagine not proposing. The revenge was supposed to be simple. He just made it impossibly complicated. 2 weeks later, Nick took Justina to meet his sister at the countryside estate where Caroline lived. "She's fragile," Nick warned as their carriage rolled through the gates. "The scandal that destroyed our family, it broke something inside her. She speaks rarely, and when she does, it's often confused. Please don't be frightened of her." Justina squeezed his hand. "I'm not frightened. I'm honoured you're trusting me with this." The house was smaller than Ashmont's London estate, but beautifully maintained. Caroline's companion, Mrs. Fletcher, met them at the door. "Your Grace, Miss Caroline is in the garden. She's having a good day, very lucid." They found Caroline sitting beneath a rose arbour, sketching in a worn notebook. She looked up as they approached, and Nick's heart clenched. She looked so much like their mother, same delicate features, same gentle eyes, except where their mother had been warm and laughing, Caroline was distant and fragile as spun glass. "Nicky?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. "You came." "Of course I came." Nick knelt beside her chair. "I brought someone to meet you. This is Lady Justina Barrett, my fiancée." Caroline's eyes widened. "Fiancée? You're getting married?" "I am. If you'll give your blessing." Caroline looked at Justina with sudden intensity. "Are you kind to him?" Justina knelt as well, meeting Caroline at eye level. "I try to be, though your brother's rather stubborn, which makes it challenging." A ghost of a smile crossed Caroline's face. "He's always been stubborn, even as a boy." She reached out tentatively, touching Justina's hand. "You're very beautiful." "Thank you. Nick told me you're an artist. May I see your sketches?" Something shifted in Caroline's expression. Surprise and pleasure mixed. "You want to see them?" "Very much." For the next hour, Justina sat with Caroline, genuinely engaged with her art and her quiet observations about the garden. Nick watched from nearby, his chest tight with emotion. Most people treated Caroline like a broken doll, pitying her, speaking slowly, avoiding real conversation. Justina treated her like a person, asked her opinions, listened to her answers, laughed at her dry observations about the gardener's terrible taste in roses. "Your brother worries too much," Caroline told Justina at one point. "He thinks I'm made of glass, but I'm stronger than I look." "I believe you," Justina said. "Anyone who survived what you survived is incredibly strong." Caroline's eyes filled with tears. "You know? About father? Nick told me some of it. I'm so sorry for what happened to your family. It wasn't fair." Caroline's voice broke. "Father was good. He trusted the wrong person, and it destroyed us all." Justina took her hand gently. "What happened to your family wasn't your fault. And look, you're still here, still creating beauty, still fighting to heal. That's not weakness, Caroline. That's courage." Caroline stared at her, then suddenly threw her arms around Justina in a fierce hug. "Don't let him push you away," she whispered. "He does that, pushes people away when he's scared. But he needs you. I can see it." Nick's throat tightened. He turned away, ostensibly to examine the roses, while his vision blurred. Later, as they prepared to leave, Caroline pulled Nick aside. "Marry her quickly," she said with unusual clarity, "before you find a reason to sabotage it." "What makes you think I'd sabotage it?" "Because you've been angry for 8 years, and anger makes people do stupid things." Caroline gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Whatever you're planning, Nicky, whatever revenge you think you need, it's not worth losing her. She's good. Don't destroy good things because you're hurting." Nick felt like she'd reached into his chest and grabbed his heart. "I won't," he promised, not sure if he was lying. In the carriage ride back to London, Justina was quiet. Nick watched her stare out the window, her expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That your sister is remarkable. That what happened to your family was a tragedy. That," she turned to face him, "that whoever destroyed your family should pay for it." Nick's blood ran cold. "What?" "Your father's business partner, the one who ruined him. That person should face justice." Justina's eyes blazed with righteous anger. What they did was cruel and calculated. They should suffer the consequences. She had no idea she was talking about her own brother-in-law. "Justina, I know revenge isn't the answer. I know it doesn't fix anything, but justice matters." She took his hand. "If there's anything I can do to help you find peace with what happened, I will. You and Caroline deserve that." Nick felt his world tilt sideways. She'd just offered to help him get revenge on Rutherford, on her own brother-in-law, on the man who'd given her sister genuine happiness. Because she cared about Nick's pain more than she cared about protecting people who'd hurt him. The plan had been to use her compassion against her. Instead, her compassion was destroying him. "You're too good for this world," Nick said hoarsely. "I'm really not." He kissed her. Right there in the carriage, propriety be damned. Poured 8 years of pain and weeks of confusion and the terrifying realization that he'd fallen completely in love with the woman he'd meant to destroy into one desperate kiss. Justina kissed him back, her hands fisting in his coat, soft sounds of surprise and desire that made Nick's control snap. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Justina's eyes were wide and her lips were swollen. "What was that for?" she whispered. "For being you. For seeing Caroline as a person. For offering to fight my battles when you don't even know what they are." Nick pressed his forehead to hers. "For making me feel something besides rage for the first time in 8 years. Nick, I love you." The words escaped before he could stop them. "God help me, I love you, I didn't mean to, didn't plan to, but I do." Justina's breath caught. "You love me?" "Desperately, completely, probably catastrophically given everything, but yes." She kissed him again, softer this time. "I love you too, even though you're stubborn and secretive and clearly hiding something from me." The confession was a knife to the chest. "Justina, if you knew, then tell me." She pulled back, meeting his eyes. "Whatever you're hiding, whatever you think will make me leave, tell me. Let me prove I'm not going anywhere." Nick opened his mouth, closed it. The truth sat on his tongue like poison. "I planned to seduce you, marry you, ruin you publicly, and destroy you to hurt Rutherford. I orchestrated every encounter. Everything was calculated. You were a weapon, not a woman. At least at first." The words wouldn't come, because telling her meant losing her, and he'd just realized he'd rather lose his revenge than lose her. "Soon," he promised, hating himself. "I'll tell you everything soon. I need to fix something first. Make sure you're protected from the consequences." "Consequences of what?" "Of loving me." Nick kissed her forehead gently. "Trust me a little longer, please." Justina studied his face, clearly torn between demanding answers and giving him time. "1 month, she said finally. "We're getting married in 6 weeks. Before then, you tell me everything. Whatever secret you're keeping, whatever you're planning, I want the truth." "You'll have it," Nick lied, because the truth would destroy them both. And he just realized he'd do anything, even become the villain of his own story, to protect her from that destruction. The revenge was supposed to be simple. He'd fallen in love instead. Now he had to figure out how to save her from the disaster he'd created, before everything came crashing down. Chapter 5, The Proposal. Nick had planned everything perfectly. Winterbourne Gardens at golden hour, when the light turned everything to honey and amber. Roses in full bloom, their scent heavy in the warm air. A secluded bench near the fountain where they'd have privacy but remain visible enough to satisfy propriety. He'd even practiced the words, romantic enough to sound genuine, calculated enough to maintain emotional distance. What he hadn't planned for was the way his hands shook as he waited. "Your Grace." Matthews had accompanied them as chaperone, currently pretending to examine roses 20 feet away. "Perhaps you should sit. You look rather pale." "I'm fine." "You look like you're about to be sick." "Also fine." Nick checked his pocket watch for the 3rd time. Justina was late. Perhaps she'd changed her mind. Perhaps she'd finally realized he was a fraud and... "Nick?" He turned to find Justina approaching through the rose arbor, backlit by golden sunlight like something from a painting. She wore pale blue, her hair swept up with small white flowers woven through the curls. She was so beautiful it hurt to look at her. She was also the weapon he'd chosen to destroy Rutherford. His stomach twisted. "You're here," he said stupidly. "You invited me to view the gardens at sunset." "Of course I'm here." She smiled, then frowned. "Are you all right? You look unwell." He stopped, started again. "I'm terrified, actually." "Of what?" "Of myself. Of what I'm about to do. Of how much I want this to be real when it started as the worst kind of lie. Of asking you something and hearing the wrong answer." Nick said instead. Justina's breath caught. Her eyes went wide. "Nick, walk with me first, please." They strolled through the gardens, Matthews following at a discreet distance. The sunset painted everything gold and rose, birds singing their evening songs. It was absurdly romantic. It was also the beginning of the end. "This garden belonged to my mother," Nick said quietly. "She spent every summer here cultivating roses. After she died, I let it fall into neglect. Couldn't bear to see it without her in it. What changed? I met someone who reminded me that beauty still exists, that growth is possible even after devastation." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "You changed, Justina. You made me remember there's more to life than anger." She touched his face gently. "Tell me what you're so afraid of. Everything. Losing her, becoming the villain, destroying the first good thing he'd felt in 8 years." "I'm afraid you'll say no," he said, which was also true in its way. "To what?" Nick took her hands, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break his ribs. This was the moment, the culmination of weeks of planning. Except it didn't feel like a plan anymore. It felt like falling. "Lady Justina Barrett." His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "You are the most extraordinary person I've ever known. You're brilliant and compassionate and brave in ways I'm only beginning to understand. You see the world as it should be and refuse to accept less. You make me laugh when I've forgotten how. You make me want to be better than I am." Tears gathered in Justina's eyes. "Nick, I'm not finished." He dropped to one knee right there in the roses, still holding her hands. "I know I don't deserve you. I know I'm complicated and damaged, and I'm not." He stopped, forcing himself to meet her gaze. "I'm not always honest. But this is honest. I love you. Desperately. Completely. I want to spend every day of my life earning the right to stand beside you." A tear slipped down her cheek. "You're proposing." "I'm begging." Nick's voice went rough. "Justina, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on a broken duke who's only just learning how to be whole again?" For one terrible moment, she just stared at him. Nick's heart stopped. Then she laughed, bright and joyful and wet with tears. "Yes, you idiot, yes!" Nick surged to his feet, pulling her into his arms. She was crying and laughing simultaneously, her face pressed against his chest. "Say it again," he demanded, needing to hear it. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, yes, yes." He kissed her, pouring every complicated emotion into it, love and guilt and desperate hope. Justina kissed him back like she was drowning and he was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Nick rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have a ring yet," he admitted. "I wanted to be sure you'd say yes first." So confident, so terrified. He cupped her face gently. "We'll choose one together, something you actually like, not just what's expected." "I love you," Justina whispered. "I know I shouldn't. We've only known each other a few weeks. But I do. I love you so much it frightens me." The words were a knife to the chest, because she loved the man she thought he was, not the man who'd planned to destroy her. "I love you too," Nick said, and meant it with everything he had. Behind them, Matthews cleared his throat delicately. "Congratulations, Your Grace, my lady. Perhaps we should return before dark." They walked back through the gardens hand in hand, Justina radiant with happiness, Nick sick with self-loathing. He'd proposed as part of a revenge plot. She'd said yes because she loved him. He was the worst person alive. The announcement appeared in the society papers 3 days later. His Grace the Duke of Ashmont is pleased to announce his engagement to Lady Justina Barrett, sister to Lady Rutherford. The couple will wed in 6 weeks. London society lost its collective mind. The diamond and the Duke, it was perfect. Romantic. Everyone claimed to have predicted it from the moment they waltzed at the Havisham ball. Sir Gerald was insufferable with triumph. Helena was cautiously pleased. Rutherford was ominously silent, and Nick felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to fall. The engagement ball was held at Ashmont House, a massive affair attended by half the ton. Nick had spared no expense. Orchestra, champagne, elaborate decorations, everything perfect, everything a lie. "You look miserable," Blackthorne observed, cornering Nick near the refreshment table. Odd expression for a man who just secured the season's most beautiful bride. "I'm not miserable. I'm overwhelmed." "You're terrified." Blackthorne studied him with concern. "What's wrong, Nick? Most men would be celebrating. Most men aren't me." Cryptic and unhelpful. Try again. Nick watched Justina across the ballroom, laughing with Helena and several other ladies. She wore cream silk that made her look like candlelight. Every man in the room was staring at her. She was his. Or would be, in 6 weeks. Unless he confessed. Unless Rutherford discovered the truth. Unless everything fell apart. I'm in love with her, Nick said quietly. Obviously, that's generally why people get engaged. No, you don't understand. Nick turned to face his friend. I'm completely catastrophically in love with her, the kind of love that makes you stupid, that makes you willing to destroy everything you've built just to keep her safe. Blackthorn's eyes narrowed. Keep her safe from what? From me. Nick, I need to go. Nick set down his champagne glass. Make excuses for me. Tell them I'm overwhelmed, exhausted, whatever sounds believable. Where are you going? To break my own heart before it breaks hers. He found Justina in the garden, escaping the crush for a moment of air. She turned as he approached, her smile brilliant. There you are. I was beginning to think you'd been kidnapped by matchmaking mamas. Narrowly escaped. Lady Pemberton wanted to discuss wedding flowers for an hour. Nick took her hands, memorizing the feel of her fingers in his. Dance with me? Here? There's no music. There's always music. He pulled her into waltz position, humming softly. They moved through the garden in silence, Nick leading her through turns and spins. Justina laughed, her head tilting back to look at the stars. This is mad, she said. Completely. I love it. I love you. Nick pulled her closer than propriety allowed. Justina, if I told you I'd done something terrible, something that could hurt you, would you forgive me? Her laughter faded. She searched his face in the moonlight. What have you done? Answer the question first. That depends on what you've done. Justina's voice was gentle but firm. Context matters, Nick. Tell me the truth. He should, right now, confess everything and accept the consequences. But she was looking at him with such love, such trust, and he was a coward. Never mind, Nick said instead. Forget I asked. Nick, dance with me. Just dance with me. So they danced in the moonlight while the ball continued inside, and Nick memorized every detail, the scent of her perfume, the warmth of her body against his, the way she hummed along when he hummed. He was going to lose her. It was only a question of when. 2 days after the engagement ball, Nick received a letter with no return address. Your Grace, we need to talk. My study. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone. R. Rutherford. Nick's blood ran cold. He arrived at Rutherford House at exactly noon, his heart hammering. The Marquess's butler showed him to the study without a word, clearly expecting him. Rutherford stood by the window, his back to the door. When he turned, his expression was cold fury, barely leashed. Close the door, Rutherford said. Nick did. You wanted to see me? Sit down. I'll stand. I said sit down. The command cracked like a whip. Nick sat, maintaining eye contact, refusing to show weakness. Rutherford moved to his desk, pulling out a folder. He tossed it toward Nick. Papers scattered across the polished surface. What is this? Nick asked, though his stomach already knew. Financial records, correspondence, witness statements from servants. Rutherford's voice was deadly calm. Everything I could find about your family's business dealings with me 8 years ago, and more importantly, everything about what you've been doing since. Nick's heart stopped. I don't know what you're. Don't insult me. Rutherford leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You think I wouldn't investigate the Duke of Ashmont suddenly courting my wife's sister? You think I wouldn't recognize the Earl of Greyson's son? You ruined my family. I conducted business. Your father made poor investments. Rutherford's tone was hard. But that's not what this is about, is it? This is about revenge. What makes you think? Because I would do the same thing. Rutherford picked up one of the papers. Detailed timeline of your courtship with Justina. Conveniently orchestrated meetings. Calculated charm. You've been planning this since the moment she debuted. Nick's hands clenched. She has nothing to do with our history. She has everything to do with it, that's the point. Rutherford's eyes were ice. You courted her to hurt me, planned to marry her and then destroy her reputation to devastate Helena. Am I warm? The silence was answer enough. I'll give you credit. Rutherford continued. It's elegant, ruthless, exactly what I would have done in your position. He leaned forward. But here's the problem, Ashmont. You fell in love with her. Nick's breath caught. Oh yes, I've been watching. You look at her like she hung the moon. You light up when she enters a room. That proposal in Winterbourne Gardens. Rutherford's smile was sharp. That wasn't strategy. It was a man in love making the worst mistake of his life. It's not a mistake. It is if you're still planning to ruin her. Rutherford's voice dropped. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to end this engagement, cleanly, with some fabricated excuse that protects Justina's reputation. You'll leave London, lick your wounds, and stay far away from my family. No. I'm sorry? No. Nick stood, his own fury finally surfacing. You don't get to dictate this. You destroyed my family, killed my father, broke my sister. Your father destroyed himself with bad investments and pride. You manipulated him, forged documents, bribed witnesses. I conducted business. Rutherford's control finally cracked. Was I ruthless? Yes. Did I take advantage of his naivety? Absolutely. But I didn't hold a gun to his head. I didn't force him to. Don't. Nick's voice went deadly quiet. Don't you dare talk about my father's death like it was his choice. You drove him to it. And you're going to drive Justina to the same kind of pain. Rutherford's words hit like physical blows. You think I don't see what's happening? You love her, but you're still trapped by your revenge plan. You can't move forward without confessing, and confessing means losing her. So you're paralyzed, letting her fall deeper in love with a lie. I'm going to tell her the truth. When? Rutherford's voice cut sharp. After the wedding? After you've trapped her legally? He shook his head. You're not going to tell her. You're too much of a coward. You'll keep postponing, keep hoping for a perfect moment that doesn't exist, and eventually she'll find out anyway, probably from me, and it will destroy her far worse than if you'd been honest from the start. Then what do you suggest? Nick's voice broke. How do I fix this? You can't. Rutherford's expression was almost pitying. That's the tragedy of revenge, Ashmont. You planned so carefully to hurt me. You didn't realize you'd hurt yourself worse. Now you're in love with the weapon you forged, and there's no way out that doesn't end in blood. Nick sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. End the engagement, Rutherford said quietly. Fabricate some excuse. I'll support whatever story you create. Say I forbade it. Say you discovered an incompatibility. Whatever protects her reputation. But end it before you destroy her completely. She loves me. She loves who she thinks you are, not who you actually are. Rutherford moved toward the door. You have 1 week. End it, or I'll tell her everything myself. At least if it comes from me, she'll have Helena to help pick up the pieces. Wait. Nick's voice was desperate. There has to be another way. Let me tell her myself. Let me... You've had weeks to tell her yourself. You chose lies. Rutherford opened the door. 1 week, Ashmont. Then I'm done protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. He left Nick alone in the study, surrounded by evidence of his own manipulation. 1 week. 7 days to figure out how to lose everything. Nick sat there until the sun set, staring at nothing, his world crumbling around him. Chapter 6. The Unraveling. The nightmare began 3 days before Rutherford's deadline. Nick had spent those days in agony, drafting and discarding letters to Justina, planning conversations that dissolved before they could begin. Every time he tried to form the words, I planned to destroy you, I used you, everything was a lie, his throat closed. He was a coward. Rutherford was right, but he had a plan now. Not a good plan, but a plan nonetheless. He would take Justina to visit Caroline again, let her see how much his sister adored her. Then, in that sacred space where honesty felt possible, he would confess everything. The revenge plot, the manipulation, all of it. She would hate him. She would leave him. But at least he would have been honest. At least he could live with himself. You're very quiet, Justina observed as their carriage rolled toward Caroline's estate. Nervous about something? Everything. I'm nervous about everything. Just thinking about my sister, Nick said, which was partially true. She's improved so much since meeting you. I'm grateful. Justina squeezed his hand. Caroline's lovely. I'm glad I can help. God, she was too good for this world. Too good for him. The visit started perfectly. Caroline was having an excellent day, lucid, engaged, genuinely happy. She showed Justina her latest sketches, shared stories about their childhood, even laughed at Nick's terrible jokes. You should marry quickly, Caroline told them over tea. Don't wait. Life's too short to postpone happiness. We're marrying in 3 weeks, Justina said, smiling. Sooner if Nick would agree, but he insists on doing everything properly. 3 weeks is too long. Caroline's gaze fixed on Nick with unsettling intensity. Something bad is coming, I can feel it. Marry her now before it's too late. Nick's blood chilled. Caroline, promise me. His sister gripped his hand. Promise you won't let her go. Promise you'll fight for her. I promise, Nick said, his voice breaking. After tea, Caroline excused herself for a rest. Nick and Justina walked through the gardens, the autumn air crisp and golden. She's perceptive, Justina said. Your sister, she sees things. She's been that way since she was young. Mother used to say Caroline saw the world sideways, noticing details everyone else missed. Nick stopped walking, turning to face Justina, which is why I need to listen to her advice about telling you the truth. Justina's expression shifted. What truth? There's something I need to... Nick stopped, his courage faltering. Something I should have told you weeks ago. Something that will change everything between us. You're frightening me. I know, I'm frightened too. Nick took her hands. But Caroline's right. I can't marry you with this secret between us. You deserve honesty. Then tell me. Justina's voice was steady despite the fear in her eyes. Whatever it is, just tell me. Nick opened his mouth. Your Grace! Caroline's companion, Mrs. Fletcher, appeared from the house, her face pale. Forgive the interruption, but there's a visitor. The Marquess of Rutherford. He says it's urgent. Nick's heart stopped. No, not now, not like this. Rutherford's here? Justina looked confused. Why would Edmund? I'll handle this. Nick started toward the house. Wait here. Nick, what's happening? Just wait. Please. He found Rutherford in Caroline's drawing room, his expression thunderous. 3 days, the Marquess said without preamble. I gave you a week. You've done nothing. I was about to tell her. Were you? Or were you about to make another excuse? Rutherford's voice was harsh. I'm done waiting, Ashmont. I'm done watching you torture both of you with this charade. This isn't your decision. It became my decision when you decided to use my family for revenge. Rutherford moved toward the door. Where is she? You're not telling her, not like this. Nick blocked his path. I'm handling it. You've been handling it for weeks while she falls deeper in love with a fantasy. Rutherford's eyes were cold. Step aside. No. I will tell her myself, Ashmont. One way or another, she's learning the truth today. The only question is whether it comes from me or you. Please. Nick's voice broke. Please just give me 1 more hour. Let me do this properly. Let me... You've had all the time in the world. Rutherford pushed past him. No more. They emerged into the garden to find Justina exactly where Nick had left her, watching them approach with growing alarm. Edmund, what are you doing here? She looked between them. What's happening? I came to tell you something about your fiancé, Rutherford said, something he should have told you himself weeks ago. Rutherford, don't. Nick's voice was desperate. Edmund, please. Justina looked terrified now. Whatever this is. 8 years ago, I conducted business with Ashmont's father, the Earl of Greyson. Rutherford's voice was cold and clear. The business went poorly. The Earl lost everything. 6 months later, he killed himself. Justina's hand flew to her mouth. Oh God, Nick. Ashmont blamed me for his father's death, Rutherford continued relentlessly, for his mother's death that followed, for his sister's breakdown, and he spent the last 8 years planning revenge. Edmund, stop. Justina's voice shook. Revenge that involved you. Rutherford's gaze never left Nick's face. He researched your family, learned you were my sister-in-law, learned I cared about Helena, who cared about you. And he realized the perfect way to hurt me was through you. No, Justina's voice was barely a whisper. No, that's not. Every encounter was planned, Rutherford said. The Hyde Park accident, the bookshop, the musicale, every conversation, every touch, every word, calculated to make you fall in love with him. Stop it. Justina's voice cracked. Edmund, stop. But Rutherford was merciless. The plan was simple. Court you, marry you, then orchestrate a public scandal that would destroy your reputation and break Helena's heart. Make me watch someone I loved suffer the way he'd suffered. Justina turned to Nick, her face white. Tell me he's lying. Please, Nick, tell me this isn't true. Nick couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. His silence was answer enough. How long? Justina's voice shook. How long have you been planning this? Justina, how long? Since the beginning. The confession tore out of him. Since before we met. I researched your family, planned the encounters, calculated every move. You were. His voice broke. You were supposed to be a weapon. The sound Justina made was inhuman, a sob that turned into something worse. But I fell in love with you, Nick continued desperately. That wasn't planned. That was real. Everything I feel for you is real. Was any of it real? Tears streamed down her face. The questions about philosophy, the conversations in the bookshop, the proposal in the gardens. The feelings were real, but the intent was false. Justina's voice rose. You looked me in the eye and asked what I wanted while planning to destroy me. You met Caroline, saw how broken your family was, and still... She stopped, her breath coming in gasps. You still planned to break me the same way. I wasn't going to go through with it. When? Justina's eyes blazed through her tears. When were you going to stop? After we married? After you ruined me? When exactly did you plan to develop a conscience? When I fell in love with you. Nick reached for her. She flinched back like he'd struck her. Don't touch me. Don't. Her voice broke completely. You told me you saw me. You said I was remarkable. You promised. She pressed her hand to her chest, struggling to breathe. You promised you wouldn't hurt me. I didn't mean for this to happen. Which part? Justina's laugh was broken glass. Falling in love or getting caught. Because from where I'm standing, the only thing you regret is that Edmund discovered your plan before you could execute it. That's not true, isn't it? She met his eyes, and Nick saw something die in her gaze. Tell me honestly, Nick, if Edmund hadn't confronted you, would you have told me the truth? Or would you have married me with this secret, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The hesitation before Nick answered told her everything. I was going to tell you, he said. Today, right before Edmund arrived, I brought you here to confess. You were going to tell me after weeks of lies, after the engagement, after I'd fallen completely in love with you. Justina's hands shook as she pulled off her engagement ring. And you want credit for that? For almost being honest? Justina, please. Did you plan the proposal? Her voice was eerily calm now. Was that speech in Winterbourne Gardens calculated too? You make me want to be better than I am. Was that part of the seduction strategy? No, that was real. All of it was real. But it was based on a lie. Justina's composure shattered again. Everything we built was on a foundation of manipulation and revenge. How am I supposed to trust anything you say when you've been lying since the moment we met? Nick had no answer, because she was right. Helena warned me. Justina said softly. She told me to be careful. That charm and genuine interest weren't the same thing, but I didn't listen because... Her voice cracked. Because for the first time in my life, someone saw me. Or I thought they did. But you didn't see me at all, did you? You just saw a tool for revenge. That's not true anymore, but it was true once, and that's enough. She placed the ring on the garden bench between them. I was right all along. No one truly sees me. They just see what they want to use me for. The words were a knife to Nick's heart because he'd proven them true. Don't do this, he begged. Don't let my mistakes destroy what we have. What we have? Justina's laugh was bitter. We have nothing, Your Grace. We never did. Just a beautiful lie and the ruins of what might have been. She turned to Rutherford. Take me home, Edmund, please. Of course. Rutherford offered his arm, his expression carefully neutral. As they walked toward the carriage, Justina paused, looking back at Nick one last time. I hope it was worth it, she said quietly. Your revenge. I hope destroying me felt as good as you imagined. I didn't destroy you. Yes, you did. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You made me believe I was worth seeing, worth knowing, worth loving. You made me trust again, and then you proved that trust was just another weapon to use against me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That's the cruelest thing anyone's ever done to me, not planning to ruin my reputation, planning to break my heart and succeeding. She climbed into the carriage without another word. Rutherford followed. Nick stood in the garden, watching them disappear, the engagement ring gleaming on the bench like an accusation. He'd gotten his revenge on Rutherford. The Marquess was suffering, watching Helena's heartbreak over Justina's devastation. Mission accomplished. Nick dropped to his knees in the grass and buried his face in his hands. He'd won. It felt exactly like losing everything. Inside the carriage, Justina broke, great, gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Helena, who'd been waiting inside, clearly forewarned by Edmund, pulled her into her arms. I'm so sorry, darling, Helena whispered. I'm so sorry. I loved him, Justina choked out. I actually loved him. How could I be so stupid? You're not stupid, you're trusting. There's a difference. He planned to destroy me. He looked me in the eye and asked what I wanted while planning to ruin everything. She couldn't finish, the sobs taking over completely. Rutherford sat across from them, his expression grim. I should have told you sooner, should have warned you the moment I suspected. You tried, Helena said quietly. I knew something was wrong. We both did. But he seemed so genuine, Justina said through tears. The questions, the conversations, the way he looked at me. Some of it probably was genuine, Rutherford said. That's what makes it worse. He fell in love with you while still planning to use you. That's not redemption. That's cruelty, wearing a prettier mask. Justina pressed her hand to her chest, feeling like her heart was shattering. He said I was remarkable, that I made him want to be better. And then he proved he wasn't willing to actually be better, Helena said gently. Words mean nothing without action, darling. The carriage rolled through the countryside, carrying Justina away from everything she'd thought she wanted, away from the man who'd taught her to hope, away from the lie she'd mistaken for love. What happens now? She asked numbly. Now, Helena said, you heal. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But you will heal, Justina, I promise. But as Justina stared out the window at the passing landscape, she wasn't sure that was true. Nick had asked what she wanted. She'd wanted someone who truly saw her. Instead, she'd gotten someone who saw only what she could do for him, and that might be the worst betrayal of all. Chapter 7. Betrayal. The scandal exploded across London like a powder keg. Within 24 hours, every drawing room in the ton buzzed with speculation. The engagement between the Duke of Ashmont and Lady Justina Barrett, society's perfect romance, had ended spectacularly. The whispers were vicious. She must have done something scandalous. Perhaps he discovered she wasn't pure. I heard the Marquess forbade it. No, I heard Ashmont found her dull. Every theory blamed Justina, because of course they did. Beautiful women were always suspect. Nick heard the gossip from his self-imposed exile at Ashmont House, drinking himself into oblivion while Matthews watched with silent disapproval. Your Grace, you need to eat something. I need to die, actually. That would solve several problems. Nick poured another brandy with unsteady hands. Have you heard what they're saying about her? I try not to listen to gossip. They're calling her damaged goods, saying I discovered some flaw and rejected her. Nick's laugh was broken. The truth is so much worse. I'm the flaw. I'm the thing that should have been rejected. Matthews removed the brandy decanter. Drinking won't fix this. Nothing will fix this. Nick dropped his head into his hands. I destroyed her, Matthews, exactly like I planned, just not the way I planned. Then rebuild her, rebuild what you destroyed. How? She won't see me, won't read my letters. Helena won't even let me pass the door. Nick looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. I wrote her 17 letters. 17, all returned unopened. Perhaps you're writing the wrong words. What words could possibly? Nick stopped. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Matthews said carefully, that private apologies mean nothing when public destruction has occurred. If you want her to believe your remorse is genuine, make it public. Public. Society is destroying her reputation as we speak. Perhaps you should set the record straight. Publicly. Completely. No matter the cost to yourself. Nick stared at him. You're suggesting I confess everything? To all of London? I'm suggesting you prove your love is worth more than your reputation. Matthews met his eyes. Or admit it isn't and let her go. Helena's country estate. Justina hadn't left her room in 3 days. She'd cried until there were no tears left, then lay in bed staring at nothing, feeling hollowed out and empty. Helena brought food that went untouched, brought books that went unread, brought gentle words that couldn't penetrate the numbness. Darling, you need to eat, Helena tried again, setting down a tea tray. Just a little. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten in days, you'll make yourself ill. Good. Justina's voice was flat. Maybe illness would be simpler than this. Helena sat on the edge of the bed, her expression pained. I know you're hurting. Do you? Justina finally looked at her sister. Do you know what it's like to be told you're remarkable and brilliant and worth seeing, only to discover it was all manipulation? That every conversation, every touch, every moment you thought was real was just... Her voice cracked. Just strategy? No, I don't know that particular pain. Helena took her hand gently. But I know betrayal, I know heartbreak, and I know recovery is possible. Is it? Because right now I can't imagine ever trusting anyone again." Justina pulled her hand away. "He asked what I wanted, Helena. He looked me in the eye and asked what I wanted most, and I told him I wanted to be seen, to matter for more than my appearance." "You do matter." "And he used that longing as a weapon." Justina's voice rose. "He saw my deepest vulnerability and exploited it. How am I supposed to recover from that?" Helena was quiet for a moment. "By remembering that his cruelty doesn't define your worth, that being deceived doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. It makes me stupid, gullible, exactly the decorative idiot everyone thinks I am. You're none of those things." Helena's voice was firm. "You're intelligent and trusting and brave enough to love openly. Those are strengths, not weaknesses. Ashmont's the one who failed, not you. Then why does it feel like I'm the one who's broken? Because heartbreak always feels like destruction. But you're not broken, darling. You're hurt. There's a difference." Justina wanted to believe her, wanted to think healing was possible. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Nick's face in Winterbourne Gardens, heard his voice promising love while planning betrayal. "You make me want to be better than I am." Lies. All of it lies. "Society's talking," Justina said quietly. "What are they saying?" Helena hesitated. "Does it matter? That bad?" "They're speculating about why the engagement ended so suddenly." "Let me guess. They're blaming me, saying I must have done something scandalous to make a duke withdraw his suit." Helena's silence was answer enough. "Of course." Justina laughed bitterly. "I'm the one who was deceived and manipulated, but I'm also the one who'll be ruined by it. Because that's how this world works, isn't it? Men do terrible things and women bear the consequences. Edmund's been trying to control the narrative, telling people it was a mutual parting, that you both realized you weren't suited. How generous of him." Justina sat up, anger finally penetrating the numbness. "Does he think that helps? Everyone knows mutual parting is code for something shameful happened. I'm still ruined. Just quietly. What would you have him do?" "I don't know." Justina's hands clenched in the bedsheets. "I don't know anything anymore. Except that I was right all along. No one truly sees me. They just see what they want to use me for. And apparently I'm very useful for revenge plots and social advancement." "Justina, I want to be alone, Helena. Please." Her sister looked like she wanted to argue but simply nodded. "I'll be downstairs if you need me. Edmund's arriving this evening. He wants to speak with you about next steps." After Helena left, Justina lay back down, staring at the ceiling. Next steps. As if there were steps to take, as if forward motion were possible. She felt frozen, trapped between the woman she'd been before Nick, naive enough to believe in love, and whoever she was supposed to become now. Someone harder, probably. Someone who didn't trust easily. Someone who saw manipulation in every kindness. Someone bitter and guarded and alone. The old Justina would have been horrified by that future. The new Justina thought it sounded safer. The pamphlet Nick worked for 3 days straight. No food, no sleep. Just words pouring out of him like blood from a wound. 50 pages of brutal, honest truth. Everything he'd done, everything he'd planned, every lie he'd told. His family's destruction. His 8 years of planning revenge. How he'd researched Justina, orchestrated their meetings, calculated every conversation. And then, the truth about falling in love despite himself. How her intelligence had surprised him. Her compassion had shaken him. Her honesty had destroyed his carefully constructed walls. How somewhere between Hyde Park and Winterbourne Gardens, the plan had stopped mattering, and she'd become everything. He wrote about the proposal, how he'd meant it as strategy but delivered it as truth. How loving her had felt like drowning and breathing simultaneously. How he'd been too much of a coward to confess until it was too late. He wrote about the garden confrontation, Justina's devastation, the ring on the bench like an accusation. He wrote, "Lady Justina Barrett is the finest person I have ever known. She deserves far better than a broken duke with revenge in his heart. But if she can find it within herself to forgive me, not to marry me, not to love me, just to believe that my love for her is real, then perhaps I can begin to forgive myself. I will wait for her answer, however long it takes, even if that answer is never." Matthews read the finished manuscript with growing alarm. "Your Grace, you realize this will destroy your reputation? Good, I deserve it. Society will tear you apart. They'll call you manipulative, cruel. I am manipulative and cruel. That's the point. Nick met his eyes. For 8 years, I've hidden behind careful strategy and social masks. Let them see who I really am. Let Justina see that I'm willing to burn everything down to prove my love is genuine. And if she still won't forgive you, then at least London will know the truth, that she's blameless, that everything was my fault. Nick's voice hardened. Have 500 copies printed. Distribute them to every major household in the ton. I want this in every drawing room by tomorrow evening. This is madness. This is honesty. For once in my miserable life, this is actually honest. The pamphlet hit London society like a bomb. Justina reads the truth. The package arrived at Helena's estate 3 days later, unmarked, no return address. Just a slim volume with an innocuous title, The Vengeful Duke's Confession, a full and honest account of terrible choices and their consequences. Justina almost threw it in the fire. Helena stopped her. Wait, look at the author. Nicholas Greyson, Duke of Ashmont. Justina's hands shook. I don't want to read his excuses. Then don't, but you might want to know what all of London is reading right now. Helena's voice was gentle. Edmund sent word. This is everywhere. Every household, every club, every drawing room. Ashmont's confessed everything publicly. What? Everything. The revenge plot, the manipulation, his feelings. All of it. Helena hesitated. People are horrified and surprisingly sympathetic. To you, not him. Justina stared at the pamphlet like it might bite her. Read it or don't, Helena said. But he's destroyed his own reputation to clear yours. That means something. After Helena left, Justina sat with the pamphlet for an hour before opening it. The first pages were clinical, detailing his family's ruin, his father's suicide, his mother's death, Caroline's breakdown, the business dealings with Rutherford that had started everything. Justina felt her throat tighten. She'd known some of this, but seeing it laid out in stark detail, the forged documents, the bribed witnesses, the systematic destruction, made her understand the depth of Nick's pain. Then came the revenge plan. Every calculated detail, the research into her family, the accidental meetings, the bookshop appearances, the musicale attendance. I planned each encounter with cold precision. Lady Justina was not a person to me. She was a weapon, a means to hurt the man who'd destroyed my family. I am not proud of this, but I will not lie about it either. Everything was calculated, everything was strategic. I am, in this regard, exactly the villain she believes me to be. Justina's hands trembled. Seeing it written so plainly that she'd been a weapon, a tool, made the betrayal fresh again. But then the tone shifted. What I didn't plan for was her. Not the beautiful debutante society saw, but the remarkable woman beneath. She saw through my staged rescue in Hyde Park immediately and called me on it with dry wit. She debated philosophy like she was born to it. She defended a vulnerable woman at the theatre without hesitation. She treated my broken sister with genuine kindness when most people offer only pity. Somewhere between the bookshop and the musicale, between the conversations about education reform and the moments of unexpected honesty, I stopped seeing a weapon and started seeing a person. The person I was supposed to destroy became the person I couldn't imagine losing. I fell in love with her, completely, catastrophically. The kind of love that makes you stupid and brave and willing to burn your entire life down just to keep her safe. Justina's vision blurred. She wiped her eyes angrily, refusing to cry. The pages continued. Nick's growing conflict, his cowardice in not confessing, the proposal that was supposed to be strategy but became truth. Meeting Caroline and realizing Justina was everything good his family had lost. I meant to propose as part of a plan. Instead, I proposed because I couldn't imagine not proposing, because she'd become more important than revenge, more important than justice, more important than anything. Then came the garden confrontation. Nick's account was brutal in its honesty. He didn't excuse himself, didn't minimize Justina's pain, just laid out the facts with devastating clarity. When Lady Justina asked if any of it was real, I hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. The truth is, some of it was calculated, and some of it was the most genuine thing I've ever felt. But I built something real on a foundation of lies, and when it collapsed, the real parts couldn't survive the fall. She asked when I would have stopped, when I would have confessed. The honest answer is, I don't know. I like to think I would have told her before the wedding, But I've been lying for so long I can't trust my own intentions anymore. The final pages were a confession of love and an acceptance of consequences. I love Justina Barrett with everything I am. That love doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing could excuse it. But it's real. It's the realest thing I've felt in 8 years of calculated strategy and careful revenge. I'm writing this not to win her back. I don't deserve that. But to clear her name. Society is blaming her for our broken engagement when the fault is entirely mine. She is blameless. She is remarkable. She is everything I pretended to be and could never actually become. If she never speaks to me again, I'll understand. I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that I destroyed something beautiful because I was too broken to recognize it until too late. But if there's any part of her that believes my love is genuine, if she can find it within herself to grant me even the smallest measure of forgiveness, I'll be waiting, however long it takes, even if that wait never ends. The pamphlet ended there. No excuses, no demands, just brutal honesty and resigned acceptance. Justina read it 3 times. Then she threw it across the room and screamed. Helena found her an hour later, pacing her room like a caged animal. You read it. I read it. Justina's voice shook. All of it. And I don't know what to feel. Justina's hands clenched. I'm furious. I'm devastated. She stopped, her breath catching. I'm still in love with him, and I hate myself for it. Helena sat carefully. Love doesn't disappear just because someone hurts you. It should. It should absolutely disappear when someone plans your destruction as elaborate revenge. Justina resumed pacing. He laid it all out, Helena. Every manipulation, every calculated moment. I was a weapon to him. At first, but not at the end. Does that matter? Does it undo the betrayal? No, Helena said honestly. But it might make forgiveness possible, eventually. I don't want to forgive him. Justina's voice broke. I want to hate him. I want to be angry and righteous and completely certain he's irredeemable. But you're not certain. No. The admission felt like defeat, because he destroyed his own reputation to clear mine. He confessed everything publicly when he could have stayed silent. She stopped, pressing her hand to her chest. He proved his love was worth more than his pride. So what are you going to do? Justina sank into a chair, exhausted. I don't know. Part of me wants to go to him right now. Part of me never wants to see him again. Part of me thinks I'm an idiot for even considering forgiveness. You're not an idiot. You're human. Helena moved to kneel beside her. There's no right answer here, darling. Just what feels true to you. What feels true, Justina said slowly, is that I love him. Even though I shouldn't, even though it's probably stupid and self-destructive. She met Helena's eyes, but I also can't just forgive him. Not yet. Not without knowing if he's actually changed or if this is just another strategy. Then tell him that. Make him prove it. How? However you need him to. Helena squeezed her hand. You hold all the power here, Justina. He burned himself to clear your name. Now you decide what happens next. On your terms. Not his. Justina stared at the pamphlet where it had landed across the room. I'll be waiting. However long it takes. He'd said he'd wait. Maybe it was time to see if he meant it. Chapter 8. The Grand Gesture and Resolution. 2 weeks later, Nick had stopped leaving Ashmont House. The scandal had been spectacular. Society was divided. Some called him a villain, others a tragic romantic. Everyone agreed he'd behaved abominably, but at least had the decency to confess. Justina's reputation, by contrast, had been fully restored. The Ton now viewed her as an innocent victim of a tormented duke's revenge plot. Sympathetic. Blameless. Several new suitors had already approached Helena about courtship. Nick heard this from Matthews and wanted to die. Your Grace, you need to eat something. I'm not hungry. You've said that for 2 weeks, and I'll keep saying it until it stops being true. Nick stared at the stack of returned letters on his desk. 23 now, all unopened, all marked return to sender in Helena's handwriting. Perhaps you should stop writing, Matthews suggested gently. Perhaps I should, but then what? Just give up. Just wait, as you promised. Waiting is torture. Love often is. Nick laughed bitterly. When did you become a philosopher? When you became a tragedy. Matthews set down a tea tray. At least drink something. Caroline's arriving tomorrow. You need to look presentable. Caroline's coming here? She insisted. Says you need, and I quote, to stop wallowing and start living. She's direct, I'll give her that. She's perceptive, always has been. Matthews moved toward the door, and she's usually right, which you'd know if you listened to her more often. After he left, Nick opened the latest returned letter, read his own desperate words, crumpled the paper, 23 letters, 14 days, no response. Maybe Justina was right to ignore him. Maybe some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. Maybe he deserved this particular hell. A knock at the study door interrupted his spiral. Matthews, I said I wasn't. It's not Matthews. Nick's heart stopped. Justina stood in the doorway. She looked different, thinner, dark circles under her eyes. But her spine was straight, her chin lifted, and her eyes were clear. How did you? Nick stood too quickly, his chair scraping. Helena wouldn't let me past the door. Helena doesn't know I'm here. Justina's voice was steady. I didn't tell her, didn't tell anyone, I just... She stopped, her composure cracking slightly. I needed to see you. Why? The question came out hoarse. Because I read your pamphlet multiple times, and I'm still... She pressed her lips together. I'm still angry, still hurt, still not sure I can trust you, but I also can't stop thinking about what you wrote. Justina, let me finish. Her voice hardened. You destroyed me. You planned to destroy me. And even though you claim you fell in love and changed your mind, the fact remains that you built our entire relationship on lies. I know. I'm not finished. Her hands clenched. You made me believe I was seen, that I mattered for more than my face. You asked what I wanted and then used that vulnerability as a weapon. That's... Her voice broke. That's the cruelest thing anyone's ever done to me. Nick wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, but she was right. About all of it. You're right, he said quietly. Every word. I'm the villain of this story. I'm the one who hurt you, and nothing I say can undo that. Then why am I here? Justina's eyes glistened. Why can't I just hate you and move on? Why do I keep reading your pamphlet and remembering how it felt when you asked about my thoughts on education? When you defended my sister's friend at the theatre? When you... She stopped, wiping her eyes angrily. When you looked at me like I hung the moon? Because some of it was real, Nick said. Not the beginning, not the plan, but the feelings, the love. That was real, Justina. That's still real. How do I know that? How do I trust anything you say when you've proven yourself a liar? You can't. Not yet. Nick moved closer but didn't touch her. Trust takes time to rebuild. I understand that. I'm willing to wait however long it takes. And if I can never trust you again, if the damage is permanent, then I'll live with that. But I'll still love you, that won't change. Justina stared at him, emotions warring across her face. I read that you wrote 23 letters. 24 now, all returned unopened. I know, Helena told me. She took a shaky breath. I didn't read them because I was afraid they'd be more lies, or worse, afraid they'd be truth and I'd forgive you too easily. There's no such thing as forgiving too easily. Forgiveness is its own timeline. Is it? Justina's voice turned bitter. Because right now I feel like forgiving you would make me weak, like it would prove I'm exactly the naive, decorative fool everyone thinks I am. You're not weak, and you're not a fool. Nick risked reaching for her hand. She let him take it, but didn't squeeze back. You're brave and brilliant, and you have every right to be angry. Don't forgive me to prove something to society. Don't forgive me at all if that's what's true for you. Then what do you want from me? A chance. His voice cracked. Just a chance to prove I'm not the man who planned your destruction. A chance to show you the man I became when I fell in love with you. A chance to earn back even a fraction of your trust. Justina pulled her hand away. And if I give you that chance and you betray me again? I won't. I swear on everything I have left. Your swear means nothing. Her composure shattered. You swore you wouldn't hurt me. You promised you saw me. You said I was remarkable. And it was all... She pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. It was all part of the plan. Nick felt something break inside him. Not all of it. The feelings were real. The love was real. I know you can't believe that yet, but it's true. Prove it. He blinked. What? Prove it. Justina lowered her hands, meeting his eyes. You say you love me. You say you've changed. Prove it. Not with words, with action. Show me you're worth the risk of trusting again. How? Tell me what you need, and I'll do it. I need time. Her voice steadied. I need you to court me again. Properly this time. No tricks, no strategies, no calculated encounters. Just honesty, even when it's hard, even when it makes you vulnerable. Done. I need you to accept that I might never forgive you, that I might decide the damage is too great. I accept that. And I need you to understand that if we try this again, it's on my terms, not yours, not society's, mine. Whatever terms you set, I'll follow them. Nick's voice was rough with emotion. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll be as honest as you need. I'll prove every day that my love is genuine. Justina studied his face for a long moment. I'm not promising anything. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, not... She stopped. Not love. Even though I still feel it, I'm not ready to trust it yet. I understand. Do you? Her eyes glistened. Because I need you to know. I'm still angry, still hurt, still not sure this isn't a massive mistake, but I also can't seem to give up on you completely, even though I probably should. Then don't. Nick reached for her hand again. This time she let him hold it. Don't give up on me. Not yet. Let me prove I'm worth the risk. One condition. Anything. Caroline. Justina's voice softened. I want to keep seeing her. Keep being her friend. Whatever happens between us, I don't want to lose her. Nick's throat tightened. She'd love that. She asks about you constantly. Then I'll visit next week. Justina squeezed his hand once, then let go. And you can call on me. Properly. With Helena present. We'll have tea and conversation like civilized people attempting courtship. Attempting? That's all I can promise right now. An attempt. The rest. She moved toward the door. The rest depends on whether you can actually be the man you claim to be in that garden. After she left, Nick stood in the empty study, his heart hammering. She'd come to him, given him a chance, set terms. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was hope, and after 2 weeks of hell, hope felt like oxygen. 6 weeks of courtship again. This time everything was different. Nick called on Justina 3 times a week, always with Helena present. They had tea, discussed books, debated philosophy. The conversations were careful at first, both of them navigating old wounds and new boundaries. But slowly something shifted. You're different, Justina observed one afternoon. More careful with your words. I'm trying to be honest instead of strategic, Nick admitted. It's harder than I expected. I've spent so long calculating every conversation that simple honesty feels terrifying. Why terrifying? Because honesty means vulnerability, and vulnerability means you could hurt me. He met her eyes. But I'm learning that's the price of actual intimacy. If I want you to trust me, I have to trust you with my real self, flaws and all. Something softened in Justina's expression. That's the first thing you've said that feels completely true. They began walking in Hyde Park again, properly chaperoned by both Helena and Matthews. No staged rescues, no calculated encounters. Just 2 people learning each other honestly. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Justina said one morning. That's terrifying. That's the point. Nick was quiet for several steps. I'm afraid of becoming my father. Not the good parts, the part that trusted too easily and paid for it with everything. I'm afraid that loving you means being vulnerable enough to be destroyed again. Justina stopped walking. And yet you're doing it anyway. Because you're worth the risk. He smiled slightly. Your turn. Something you've never told anyone. I'm afraid of being right. About no one truly seeing me. I'm afraid that even this... She gestured between them. Even if we rebuild trust, even if we try again, I'm afraid you'll eventually see through to whatever's actually underneath, and you'll find it disappointing. Impossible. You don't know that. I do, actually. Nick's voice was gentle. Because I've seen you at your worst, devastated and angry and breaking in that garden, and I've seen you at your best, defending strangers and loving my sister and demanding honesty even when it hurts. All of it is remarkable. All of it is you. Justina's eyes glistened. You're getting better at this honesty thing. I have excellent motivation. They visited Caroline together. Justina kept her promise, maintaining the friendship regardless of her relationship with Nick. His sister bloomed under the attention, growing stronger and more present. You should marry her quickly, Caroline told Nick during one visit, before you find another way to sabotage it. I'm not sabotaging anything. You're overthinking. I can see it. Caroline's gaze was shrewd. You're so busy trying to prove you've changed that you're forgetting to just be changed. The words hit like a revelation. That night, Nick stopped writing calculated letters. stopped planning perfect conversations, just started being honest. When Justina asked difficult questions, he answered truthfully, even when the truth was unflattering. When she pushed back on something he said, he listened instead of defending. When she needed space, he gave it without resentment. Slowly, impossibly, trust began to rebuild. 3 months later, "I think I'm ready," Justina said. They were in Ashmont's library, the same place Nick had first invited her to view his philosophy collection. Except this time everything was different. This time it was real. "Ready for what?" Nick asked, though his heart knew, to try again, properly. Justina set down her book. "I'm still scared, still not entirely sure I can trust you, but I also can't imagine my life without you in it, and I think—" She took a shaky breath. "I think that means I'm ready to forgive you." Nick's throat tightened. "You don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I want to." She moved closer. "You've spent 3 months proving you've changed, proving your love is genuine, and I believe you, Nick. I actually believe you." "Justina, I'm not saying it doesn't still hurt. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, that pain doesn't just disappear. But I'm choosing to trust that you're not that man anymore, that the person you've become is worth the risk of loving again." Nick cupped her face gently. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning that trust, every single day." "I know," she smiled through tears. "That's why I'm ready." He kissed her, soft, careful, full of reverence. Justina kissed him back, her hands fisting in his coat. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nick rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered, "properly this time, with honesty and trust and no secrets between us." "Yes," Justina laughed wetly. "Yes, you impossible man. Yes." The wedding. They married quietly 6 weeks later in a small church with only close family present. Caroline served as witness, radiant in her happiness. Helena and Rutherford attended. The Marquess and Nick had reached an uneasy truce, bound by their mutual love for the women in their lives. "You hurt her again and I'll destroy you," Rutherford said before the ceremony. "If I hurt her again, I'll help," Nick replied. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate ball, no society spectacle, just 2 people promising honesty and love. When Nick said "I do," he meant it with everything he was. When Justina said "I do," tears streamed down her face. They sealed the vows with a kiss that felt like forgiveness and hope and new beginnings. At the small wedding breakfast afterward, Caroline pulled Nick aside. "You did it," she said. "You actually learned to be better instead of just planning to be better." "I had good motivation. You had love." Caroline's smile was bright, real love, the kind that changes you. Nick looked across the room at his wife, laughing at something Helena said. She caught his gaze and smiled, her whole face lighting up. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I did." Epilogue. 1 year later, Justina found Nick in their library, surrounded by papers. "Working late again?" He looked up, smiling, reviewing Caroline's trust documents. "I want to make sure she's fully provided for." "You're a good brother." Justina moved to sit beside him. "She's doing so well, you know. Mrs. Fletcher says she's the happiest she's been in years." "She has you to thank for that. Your friendship." Nick's voice caught. "It means everything to her, to me. She's easy to love." Justina leaned against his shoulder. "Speaking of love, I have news." "Oh, I'm with child." Nick's hands stilled. He turned to her slowly. "You're pregnant, due in 6 months." Justina's smile was radiant. "Are you happy?" "Happy?" Nick pulled her into his arms, his voice breaking. "Justina, I'm terrified and overjoyed and completely overwhelmed. He kissed her fiercely. "I'm so happy I can barely breathe." Justina laughed against his lips. "Good, because I was worried you'd panic." "I'm absolutely panicking, but in the best possible way." He pulled back, his hands cradling her face. "We're having a baby." "We are." "I'm going to be a father." "You are." Justina's smile turned mischievous. "Though fair warning, I plan to be one of those scandalous mothers who actually raises her own children instead of leaving them entirely to nurses." "Scandalous indeed. What will society say?" "I stopped caring what society says about a year ago." She kissed him softly. "Around the time I married a duke who destroyed his own reputation to prove he loved me." Nick's expression turned serious. "Do you ever regret it? Forgiving me? Taking me back?" "Sometimes I regret how much it hurt, how long it took to trust again." Justina's voice was honest. "But I don't regret choosing you, not for a second." Even knowing what I planned? What I almost did? Even knowing that? She took his hand, placing it on her still flat stomach. Because the man who planned that revenge isn't the man holding me now. You chose to change. That matters. I chose you over revenge. Best decision I ever made. Second best, Justina corrected. The best decision was confessing publicly instead of letting me take the blame. Fair point. Nick smiled. Though both decisions were terrifying. Love usually is. They sat together in comfortable silence, Nick's hand on her stomach, Justina's head on his shoulder. I see you, Nick said quietly. Every day exactly as you are, brilliant and fierce and occasionally terrifying, the mother of my child, my wife, my partner, the woman who saved me from myself. And I see you, Justina replied. Not the vengeful duke, not the man who planned my destruction, just you. Flawed and honest and trying every day to be better than you were yesterday. Is it enough? It's everything. Nick kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her hair. Outside, London bustled with its usual chaos, gossip and scandal and social manoeuvring, but inside this library, in this moment, there was only truth. Only love. Only the future they'd built from the ashes of betrayal. Tell me something, Justina said. If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you still plan the revenge? Still seek me out? Nick was quiet for a long moment. Honestly? Always honestly. I'd still seek you out, but not for revenge. He tightened his arms around her. I'd seek you out because even then, before I knew you, you were already the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking. What question? How to live again instead of just surviving. Justina's eyes glistened. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. I've been practicing. It shows. She kissed him, soft and lingering. When she pulled back, her smile was brilliant. I love you, Nicholas Greyson, even when it's complicated, even when it's hard. I love you. I love you too, Nick whispered. Every day, for the rest of our lives, I see you, Justina, and I'll never stop seeing you. Promise? I promise. And this time, finally, completely, it was the truth. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought. I truly love reading them. I'd also love to know where you're listening from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. There are many more romance audiobooks waiting for you here, with new stories